Chapter 880. The China region, which had just calmed down, was once again stirred up by the great Xia dynasty's recruitment and bidding announcements. Ouyang Shuo, the initiator, was in no mood to care. Because on the 1st of June, Zhenan County Chief Mu Lanyue finally arrived at Shanghai City. Even when she saw Ouyang Shuo, she still did not know why she was summoned to the capital. Brother King. In the imperial study, Mu Lanyue bowed gracefully. Among the officials of the dynasty, Mu Lanyue was the only one who could address Ouyang Shuo as such. Sit. Ouyang Shuo smiled and looked at the girl in front of him. In just a few years, the innocent girl he had met had completely grown up. She was radiating a dazzling light. Although the two of them spent more time apart than together, they were not siblings, but they were more like siblings. Mu Lanyue's parents had already left the Mars base and were on their way to Hope Planet. After chatting for a while, Ouyang Shuo got to the point. Do you want a change of environment? Mu Lanyue was startled. She rolled her eyes and said, Brother King, you want me to work in the capital? That's good. Mu Lanyue was naturally happy to see Ouyang Shuo often. Ever since she became the Zhenan County Chief, the court had a rule that local officials were not allowed to leave their territory without an imperial summons. Otherwise, it would be a crime of disrespect. Therefore, Mu Lanyue rarely had the opportunity to return to Shanghai City. Mu Lanyue's question was not baseless. As a senior county chief, Mu Lanyue was not completely ignorant of the news in the court. There was a rumor in the court that the cabinet intended to have a round of overlapping appointments between local officials and court officials. Some local officials would be transferred back to the court, while some court officials would be sent to the local government offices to gain experience. This kind of overlapping appointment was beneficial to the dynasty. If the court was a pool of stagnant water, it would be terrifying. As for whether the cabinet had the intention of the king, outsiders did not know. Ouyang Shuo smiled and said, You are well informed. He paused and continued, This time, I did not summon you to work in the capital. I hope you will be the governor of Morocco province. Are you willing to share my burden? Mu Lanyue's eyes widened. It was clear that she was not mentally prepared at all. After a while, she said hesitantly, I am willing to go to Morocco to work, but as the governor, I'm afraid I can't do it, right? Sister Baihua hasn't even become the governor yet. Hearing this, Qing Yi glanced at Ouyang Shuo intentionally or unintentionally. Ouyang Shuo smiled and said, You don't have to worry about anything. Baihua has his own arrangements. The Morocco province was isolated overseas and needed a trustworthy person to oversee it. I've thought about it and I think you're the most suitable. When Mu Lanyue heard this, a sweet smile flashed in her eyes. Even so, she was still not confident enough. She said, Let me think about it? Ouyang Shuo waved his hand forcefully and said, What are you thinking about? Don't worry, I won't let you fight alone. Do you know the Zhaoqing prefectural governor, Du Sijing? I'm preparing to transfer Du Sijing to the position of Morocco province's director of administration. With Du Sijing's assistance, you don't have to worry. In addition, the officials of Zhenan County are also at your disposal. Ouyang Shuo was extremely fond of Mu Lanyue for being able to take along her subordinates when transferring. Mu Lanyue was filled with gratitude. She knew that her brother intended to nurture her. After thinking for a moment, she finally made up her mind and said, Since brother trusts me, then I'll give it a try. Good. This is the Yu I know. It's settled then. Ouyang Shuo made his decision. Mu Lanyue nodded solemnly. She made up her mind to govern the Morocco province well so that she wouldn't let down her brother's kindness. Ouyang Shuo continued, Pack up and head to the Morocco province. I'll have Pavilion Elder Jiang accompany you. Labat City and Shanghai City have a teleportation array. When you're free, I'll pardon you and allow you to return to Shanghai City to relax. Thank you, Brother King, for your grace. Mu Lanyue stood up and bowed respectfully. That afternoon, Mu Lanyue went to the Moroka province accompanied by the cabinet chief Jiang Shang. At the same time, Mu Lanyue and Du Sijing's appointment orders were sent to the various prefectures of the province. According to the imperial court system, the governor was a third-rank official, while the prefectural governor was only a fifth-rank official. Mu Lanyue's promotion was equivalent to a 5-rank promotion. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that she was riding a rocket. For a moment there were those who admired her, those who were jealous, and those who secretly criticized her. Even Bai Hua couldn't help but feel a ripple in his heart. Mu Lanyue, the first governor of the dynasty, had become a supernova in the imperial court, shining brightly. Fortunately, the Moroka province was isolated and unknown. Although there were ripples, it wasn't enough to cause any big waves. If Mu Lanyue had been appointed as the governor of the South Sichuan province, it would have been very difficult for her to pass the appointment. At the very least, she wouldn't have been able to pass the cabinet. After sending Mu Lanyue off, Ouyang Shuo immediately sent a letter to Ko Zhuan, who was in charge of the administrative affairs of the Moroka province. He stated that he would listen to Mu Lanyue's opinion on the appointment of officials in the Moroka province. The two of them discussed this matter together, which was also a sign of respect for Mu Lanyue. With Ko Zhuan's political wisdom, he would definitely understand Ouyang Shuo's good intentions. After everything was settled, it was already 3 in the afternoon. Although it was still early, Ouyang Shuo was preparing to get off work. Today was Children's Day. Although Bing had grown up to be a young girl, she was still at the age to celebrate Children's Day. Early in the morning, Bing pestered Ouyang Shuo, saying that there was a new food street in the city and wanted her brother to accompany her to play in the afternoon. The little girl said this just to find an excuse for her brother to accompany her. When Ouyang Shuo heard this, he couldn't refuse. Ever since he entered the game, apart from the beginning, Ouyang Shuo had been busy non-stop. He rarely had time to accompany Bing alone. Thinking about it, he felt a little guilty. Therefore, in the afternoon, Ouyang Shuo asked Qingyi to reject all summons and get off work early. When he returned to the harem, Bing was already waiting. When she saw that Ouyang Shuo had returned early, she immediately smiled. Ouyang Shuo said, "Wait a moment, Big Brother will go change clothes." Since he was accompanying Bing to go shopping, Ouyang Shuo didn't want to be too eye-catching, so he changed into a set of casual clothes. The accompanying guards naturally had to change into casual clothes, otherwise they would still be too eye-catching. Even Bing put on a little bit of a disguise. Otherwise, with Bing reputation in the city, it would be hard for her not to be recognized. After a short while, after changing their clothes, the group quietly left the summer palace. Walking on the bustling street, Ouyang Shuo and his group looked like a young master taking a trip with his mistress and servants. In the bustling city, this kind of arrangement could be seen everywhere. The food street that Bing mentioned was located in the West District, not far from the capital. It was said that this food street was built by a player merchant. He claimed to have gathered hundreds of special delicacies from all over the world. Even overseas delicacies could be tasted here. This was a capable person. He must have borrowed the creativity of the food street in real life. Shanghai City was truly a place where 100 flowers bloomed and 100 schools of thought contended. With an inclusive attitude, all kinds of new things appeared continuously, attacking the senses of the natives and breaking the old system time and time again. Although it was afternoon, the food street was already very lively. There was an endless stream of pedestrians. With the special permission of Shanghai City's government office, carriages were prohibited from entering the food street. Regardless of whether they were officials, nobles or commoners, they could only walk when entering the food street. If it was in the system's royal city, this would be unimaginable. However, in Shanghai City, both the natives and the government officials were used to this. Ouyang Shuo looked around. The food street's advertisement was true. What he saw were all kinds of special delicacies from all over the world. Tianjin pancake fruit pancake, Northeast dumpling soup, Beijing fried liver, Hunan spicy soup, Sichuan hot and sour noodles, Jiangsu soup dumplings, Lingnan noodles, Guilin rice noodles, Lanzhou beef ramen, Chongqing noodles, and so on. This scene reminded Ouyang Shuo of the scene where he and his sister went shopping for New Year's goods in real life. He was really emotional. Although only 3 years had passed, it felt like a lifetime. Bing begged Ouyang Shuo to come here because she missed him. The little girl has really grown up, Ouyang Shuo thought to himself. Perhaps it was a coincidence. Just as Ouyang Shuo was feeling emotional, 2 women dressed like swordsmen walked toward him. They were holding barbecued skewers in their hands and eating them without a care for their image. Looking closely, it was Ouyang Shuo's middle school classmates, Tan Xiaoli and Meng Feifei. 3 years ago, at the Jiaozhou New Year's market, Ouyang Shuo had brought Bing to buy New Year's goods and met them by chance. The passage of time was truly unfathomable. Ouyang Shuo didn't know that the usually quiet Meng Feifei had a time when she didn't care about her image. The temptation of delicious food was something even a young girl couldn't resist. The 2 of them naturally saw Ouyang Shuo's group and immediately recognized them. Tan Xiaoli was about to greet them, but before she could finish, Meng Feifei pinched her and immediately came to her senses. It was obvious that if Ouyang Shuo's identity was exposed, it would cause a huge wave. Ouyang Shuo smiled and said, "What a coincidence. Why, do you want to sit inside?" As he spoke, he pointed to the Chongqing noodle shop on the left. "Sure." Meng Feifei took the initiative to reply this time. Seeing Ouyang Shuo looking at the barbecued skewers in her hands, she felt embarrassed and put her hands behind her back. What a shy girl. As they spoke, the group had already entered the noodle shop. "Dear customers, please come in. Would you like to stay in the main hall or a private room?" The waiter saw that Ouyang Shuo's group had an extraordinary bearing and didn't dare to neglect them. Ouyang Shuo said, "Find us a private room on the 2nd floor." "All right." The waiter was full of smiles as he led the way in front. Although it was inappropriate to sit in a private room in the noodle shop, they were too ostentatious. Ouyang Shuo was worried that they would be recognized if they sat in the main hall for too long. Now that he saw Meng Feifei and Tan Xiaoli, Ouyang Shuo was suddenly interested and wanted to have a good chat with these 2 old friends. Ever since he had ascended to a high position, Ouyang Shuo had been separated from the masses for too long. Chapter 882. Ouyang Shuo didn't immediately agree to Lu Su's suggestion because he had other plans. Ouyang Shuo planned to use the first batch of Z1 warships as the framework to form a personal guard fleet, temporarily named the Royal Fleet, similar to the Imperial Guards in the army. In the future, there would be frequent kingdom wars, and Ouyang Shuo would often have to go out to sea. He would need a standing fleet by his side, and he wouldn't be able to transfer battleships from the 5 fleets every time he went out to sea. It would be truly inconvenient. Therefore, there was no need for the Royal Fleet to have a full complement of 5 formations. For now, 1 formation was enough. However, the Royal Fleet needed to be equipped with the strongest Marine Corps to replace the role of the Imperial Guard. He couldn't say that Ouyang Shuo had to bring the Imperial Guards with him every time he went out to sea, which was extremely inconvenient. During the voyage last year, the fleet that had been temporarily formed was the predecessor of the Royal Navy. It just so happened that the Southern Border Fleet had already withdrawn from the North Bay, and the Royal Fleet was stationed at the North Sea port. After listening to the king's plan, Zheng He took the lead to express his support and said, "The king is the ruler of a country. In the navy, there is indeed a need for such a fleet to protect the king and demonstrate the majesty of the Celestial Empire. The establishment of the Royal Fleet would definitely improve the status of the navy in the army of the dynasty." As the commander-in-chief of the navy, Zheng He was naturally happy to see it happen, so he took the lead to express his opinion. "We second the motion." The ministers present were naturally tactful and nodded in agreement. After all, the royal fleet was only a single formation, so it was not too much of a burden to the dynasty. Since that was the case, how could the ministers oppose it? Moreover, it was a fact that the king often went out to sea. Equipping such a fleet was also to maintain the face of the dynasty, and it was a big matter. Ouyang Shua nodded. He looked at Lu Su again and said, "Of course, Zijing's proposal is also reasonable. In this king's opinion, it would be better to work on both fronts and complete the establishment of the royal fleet before October. The vacated tower ships can be transferred to the coastal fleet one after another, so that they can take shape as soon as possible." "Yes, sir." Before he left, Zheng He asked cautiously, "Does your Majesty have any candidates for the Royal Navy Admiral in mind?" Ouyang Shua waved his hand and said, "The command center will first draw up a detailed reorganization plan, and the command center can take the lead in forming the fleet. As for the Navy Admiral, we'll discuss it later." Among the commanders of the 5 fleets, there was no one that Ouyang Shua was very fond of. "Yes, sir." Once all matters had been discussed, the court was dismissed. Not long after Ouyang Shua returned to the imperial study, before he could even warm his seat, the office of transmission responsible for delivering official documents hurriedly walked in. "Why are you in such a panic?" Ouyang Shua frowned. The Minister of Communication did not dare to be negligent. He held a secret letter with both hands, bowed and said, "Your Majesty, Gu Xiuwen, the city guard of Friendship City, has just sent over an urgent letter, marked as extremely urgent." "What?" Ouyang Shua stood up. According to the rules, unless it was a matter of life and death, the local officials could not issue an extremely urgent document. "Bring it over quickly." "Yes, sir." Ouyang Shua received the secret letter and opened it on the spot. The more he read, the more unsightly his expression became. Never had he imagined that something would happen to Friendship City at this time. If one were to trace the source, one would have to start from the ocean voyage last year. Last June, Ouyang Shua arrived in Somalia with his fleet and stopped at the port of Berbera. On the same night, he encountered a well-planned assassination. Fortunately, Ouyang Shua was lucky and escaped the calamity. In Somalia, Ouyang Shua led the fleet and defeated the 3 largest pirate groups in Somalia. He also exposed the true colors of Farah, the leader of the largest guild in Somalia, the Cheetah mercenary team. With this achievement, Ouyang Shua was conferred a title by the Somali royal family and was able to establish Friendship City in Somalia. This gave his territory a foothold in the Gulf of Aden, and he enjoyed a lot of glory. On the contrary, Farah, who had lost the war and was a sinner of Somalia, became the leader of the serious pirate team and lurked in the waters around the Gulf of Aden. This lay dormant for nearly a year. Unexpectedly, under Farah's leadership, the serious pirate team not only recovered, but they also swallowed the other 2 pirate groups. Their strength increased greatly, and they became the most powerful existence in the Gulf of Aden. Farah himself was known as the Pirate King. Ouyang Shua did not expect that his soft-heartedness back then had led to his own demise. Naturally, Farah hated Ouyang Shua to the core. That morning, the serious pirate team suddenly launched an attack on Friendship City, while the Mediterranean Fleet's 5th Fleet was still in the base city. Caught off guard, the brave harbor outside of Friendship City fell, and hundreds of merchant ships docked there were looted and suffered heavy losses. When Gu Xiuwen sent the letter, more than 60,000 vicious pirates had already attacked the outer city of Friendship City and started a monstrous massacre in the city. The commercial city was in the middle of a war. The Friendship City Guard Division was defeated and had already retreated to the inner city. They planned to rely on the defenses in the inner city to deal with the pirates until reinforcements arrived. Under such circumstances, Gu Xiuwen, the mayor of Friendship City, sent an urgent secret message. Strangely enough, when the Mediterranean Fleet's 5th Fleet was stationed in the Gulf of Aden, they did not see the serious pirate team. This was what they meant by saying that a cat had its way, and a dog had its way. As local tyrants, if the pirates really wanted to hide, no one would be able to find them. However, the serious pirate team did not leave any traces, and it was too unusual. Ouyang Shua guessed that there must be something strange about this, but it was not the time to think about it now. Guards! Here! Su Chu walked in. Ouyang Shua's expression was cold, but he was very calm inside. He had seen all kinds of storms in the past few years. He said, "Order the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd divisions of the Monolith Army to gather at the teleportation formation and follow me to reinforce Friendship City." The Monolith Army was the 1st division of the Imperial Guards stationed in the capital, and it was a pure mountain barbarian heavy infantry division. Yes, sir. The mountain barbarian soldiers were more suitable for fighting in the city. Currently, the 2nd and 3rd Imperial Guards were stationed in the capital, so they could mobilize the Monolith Army. Moreover, the Monolith Army had been stationed in the capital for a long time, so they could not fight all day. In less than half an hour, Ouyang Shua arrived at the teleportation formation under the escort of his personal guards. Jia Su, Qingyi, and the others did not come with him. The situation was urgent, so there was no need to bring too many people. At the same time, the 3 divisions of the Divine Martial Guards and the Monolith Army had also arrived. They were led by Deputy Commander Shi Hu. Shi Hu's eyes were overflowing with battle intent. He had not been on the battlefield for a long time, so his men were very stifled. Seeing this, Ouyang Shua nodded in satisfaction. From the rapid gathering of the Monolith Army, although the army was stationed in the capital, the soldiers did not slack off and were ready to go on the battlefield at any time. Let's go. Ouyang Shua did not waste any time and entered the teleportation formation first. With a flash of white light, Ouyang Shua appeared in Friendship City. As soon as he walked out of the teleportation formation, Ouyang Shua heard the sounds of fighting coming from not far away. The sounds of ordinary people running for help could also be heard. The pirates were not like the regular army. Even if they were besieging the city, there was no saying that they did not disturb the people. The people in the city were going to suffer a great crime. Ouyang Shua raised his head and saw that the outer city and the port in the distance were filled with smoke. Needless to say, it was definitely the black-hearted pirates who had started the fire. Arson, murder, and plunder, they really did all kinds of evil. Farah was venting his hatred towards Ouyang Shua on the Friendship City. This time, Friendship City had really suffered a huge setback. Near the teleportation formation, Gu Xiuwen was already waiting with a group of officials. When he saw the king, he immediately bowed and said sincerely, "Your humble servant greets your majesty. The Friendship City has been attacked and the outer city has fallen. Your humble servant cannot escape the blame. Please punish me, your majesty." Ouyang Shua waved his hand and said, "Now is not the time to talk about this. Let's beat back the pirates first." Yes. Seeing this, Gu Xiuwen retreated to the side. Another half an hour passed, and the 40,000 soldiers of the Monolith Army were all teleported over. In just this short period of time, the guards of the inner city had met with danger again and again. Fortunately, the pirates had not managed to break through. Logically speaking, the guards of the Friendship City were not pushovers. Seeing that they had been beaten to such a sorry state, it could be seen that Farah was indeed capable of training a group of pirates to be so ferocious. Ouyang Shua did not panic and said to Shi Hu, "Immediately take your men and go up and teach these pirates a lesson. Let them know the consequences of invading the great Xia dynasty." Although Friendship City had opened the teleportation formation, it was not open to the public. At this moment, Farah probably did not know that the reinforcements of the great Xia dynasty had already arrived. Otherwise, Farah would not dare to attack Friendship City even if he was given more gut. Yes. Ouyang Shua continued to instruct, "Remember, don't just rush up. First, send a group of people to block all the city gates. Close the gates and beat the dogs. I want these pirates to not be able to return. In front of the monolith army, no matter how well trained the pirates were, they were still useless. This time, Ouyang Shuo was going to be ruthless. He would rather destroy the outer city in order to catch all of these pirates in one fell swoop. Rest assured, Your Majesty. I will accept the punishment for letting one pirate escape. Shi Hu issued a military order and left with his troops in a grandiose manner. Ouyang Shuo looked at Su Chu and said, "Take the divine martial guards and go around to the port outside the city. See if you can capture the pirate leader Farah alive." According to Gu Xiuwen, Farah was very cunning and had not entered the city yet. Understood. Su Chu grinned and left with the 3,000 divine martial guards. In front of the monolith army, the pirates were still useless. But in front of the divine martial guards, the pirates were not even comparable to chickens and ducks. Therefore, Su Chu was confident that he could move unimpeded in the enemy's formation. With a whoosh, only 200 personal guards were left in the same place. After giving the military order, Ouyang Shuo looked at Gu Xiuwen with a smile on his face. He waved his hand and said, "Let's go. Bring me to the mayor's mansion." His Majesty was so calm. Coupled with the sounds of killing not far away, it was truly admirable. Gu Xiuwen felt ashamed. Compared to His Majesty, he was still not calm enough. After calming himself down, Gu Xiuwen said respectfully, "Your Majesty, please." Chapter 883. Just as Ouyang Shuo and his party arrived at the Friendship City, a conversation was taking place in the Somali King's king and his subordinate military minister in the Somali King's palace. The Somali king played with a string of agates in his hand, and the meaning in his eyes was unclear as he said, "The serious pirate group should have attacked Friendship City by now, right?" The military minister smiled apologetically and said, "I just received news that they have already broken into the outer city." "Is that so? Farah does have some skills." After a pause, the Somali king suddenly asked, "What about the great Xia dynasty? Have reinforcements arrived?" "There's no news yet, but with the reaction speed of the great Xia dynasty, they'll definitely be able to send reinforcements." The Somali king nodded, and the smile on his face grew wider. Seeing this, the military minister said flatteringly, "Your Majesty is wise to not tell Farah about the teleportation formation in the Friendship City. In this way, be it the Heavenly Wolf Pirates who take over Friendship City or the Great Xia Dynasty who annihilates the Heavenly Wolf Pirates, it will be beneficial to us." "Ha!" The King of Somalia laughed heartily. Friendship City, City Lord Residence. Ouyang Shuo leisurely entered the City Lord's mansion and sat in the rear with a calm expression. The front line was in a fierce battle. Friendship City was located in a basin, surrounded by mountains on 3 sides and the sea on 1 side. Shi Bao led the Monolith Army's 3rd Division out of the southern city gate, and along the small path between the city wall and the foot of the basin, they headed north. After marching at a rapid pace, it took them less than half an hour to successfully take down the east and west city gate. Shi Bao left half of his troops to guard the 2 city gates, while the rest of his troops continued to head north. They launched a pincer attack from both sides, heading straight for the northern city gate. When he passed by the Brave Port, he was finally noticed by the pirates outside the city. Farah was cunning and cherished his life very much. Even though he had already invaded the outer city, he still arranged nearly 10,000 pirates to stay at the port outside the city, ready to retreat at any time. As for Farah himself, he didn't even leave the ship. He was still on the pirate ship at the port. The moment they saw the Stone Leopard tribe, the pirates guarding outside the city thought that they were the garrison division. They couldn't help but mock, "Hey, look at this group of soldiers. Don't tell me they are so scared that they want to escape by ship. It must be. What a bunch of cowards. Let's go, brothers. Don't let them escape. Boss said that today, Friendship City will be bathed in blood." Blood bathe Friendship City. The pirates clamored as they surrounded him. The ignorant were truly fearless. Su Chu, who was traveling with the Stone Leopard tribe, grinned and said to the Stone Leopard tribe, "General Shi, go and seal the north gate. Leave these small fries to us." "Thank you." Shi Bao knew the combat power of the divine martial guard, so he didn't stand on ceremony. After cupping his fists, he led his troops away. Su Chu held his saber horizontally and uttered a word, "Kill! Kill!" 3,000 godly guards pulled out the T1 Tang swords from their waists and charged. Only then did the pirate notice something strange. He muttered to himself, "Something's not right. Are they here to die? Who cares? Let's kill it first. Not bad, it's good that you're here. Let's kill him to our heart's content." Kill! The successive victories had already clouded the minds of this group of pirates. They were so inflated that they didn't even know what their surnames were. In an instant, the two groups of people were fighting at close quarters. As soon as they made contact, the pirates were filled with regret. They knew that they had kicked an iron plate this time. Compared to the guards, the enemies in front of them were far too savage. Every time their saber fell, heads would fall to the ground. When it came to killing people, they were much more savage than these pirates. On the other hand, the pirates' counterattack was comical. It was a very fierce attack, but they couldn't even get close to the enemy. The enemy soldiers were all as slippery as loaches. He didn't know that the soldiers of the Divine Martial Guard were all skilled, and their movement techniques were naturally exceptional. In less than half an hour, the 10,000 pirates were utterly defeated under the attack of the Divine Martial Guard. They all covered their heads and fled like rats, crying for their parents. It was an indescribable wretchedness and misery. Some clever pirates had already quietly retreated to the port and were ready to leave by ship. The pirates were depressed, and Su Chu was also in a dilemma. Finishing off the small fries in front of him wasn't much of a contribution to the Divine Martial Guard. Su Chu wanted the big fish, the pirate leader that the king spoke of. But as far as the eye could see, the huge port was filled with pirates, but there was no one who looked like the leader. Seeing that some pirates were about to escape by ship, Su Chu panicked. Su Chu turned his saber and knocked with the back of the saber, subduing a pirate and almost knocking him out. Using his left hand as thick as a thigh, he grabbed the other's collar and shouted, "Speak, where is your leader?" That pirate was also quite pitiful. He was already dizzy from encountering a fiend like Su Chu. Frightened by Su Chu's loud voice, his body trembled. He didn't dare to hesitate and quickly said, "The leader is still on the ship." "What?" Su Chu was furious. He pushed out with his left hand, and the pirate fell to the ground. He did not dare to stay any longer. He rolled and crawled, staggered, and ran far away. He was in an extremely sorry state. He didn't dare to stay in this godforsaken place any longer. Su Chu naturally didn't mind a small fish. He looked at the port not far away and saw many merchant ships on fire. Thick smoke billowed, and it looked like they couldn't be saved. There were many merchants on the shore, looking at the burning merchant ships. They wanted to cry but had no tears. The most eye-catching thing on the surface of the sea were the pirate ships that were coming one after another. In the middle of the pirate ships, there was a huge sailboat that was very eye-catching. It must be the flagship of the pirate group. Unfortunately, the Divine Guards didn't know how to sail a ship, so they couldn't do anything. The depressed Su Chu could only vent his anger on the pirates on the shore. For a moment, there were wails and howls. While Su Chu was looking at the sea, Farah, who was on the ship, was also paying attention to the movements on the shore. The battle scene that appeared through the binoculars made Farah's heart go cold, and the uneasiness in his heart became more and more intense. When he saw the attire of the Divine Guards, Farah was completely chilled. A year ago in Somalia, Farah had seen the Divine Guards before, so he recognized them at a glance. The Divine Guards of the Great Xia dynasty suddenly appeared in Friendship City, and the meaning was obvious. F***ck, I've been tricked. Farah was exasperated. The Heavenly Wolf pirate group was naturally the local snake in the sea, but they were in the dark when they came ashore. Under the intentional concealment of Friendship City, Farah didn't have the ability to find out about the teleportation array. One careless move and the whole game would be lost. Farah was also a rather decisive person. He knew that he couldn't stay any longer and had to leave immediately. However, when he thought of his hard work for a year, and the family business that he had painstakingly saved up would be gone in a day, Farah's heart bled. Friendship City, I will be back. Farah's eyes were red. He gritted his teeth and immediately set sail, taking the gold, silver, and jewelry that he had plundered this time, and was the first to escape. As for the old scores with the Somali royal family, he had to escape this disaster first. Su Chu, who was on the shore, had been paying attention to the movements on the sea. When he saw the pirate flagship suddenly set sail, he knew that things were not good. He was afraid that he would not be able to complete the mission given by the king. The pirates on the shore were not stupid. Seeing that their leader had escaped, they wished that they could grow 4 legs and run faster than Rabbit. Unfortunately, they were not as lucky as Farah. The pirate leader had escaped, and the greatest credit was gone. Naturally, Su Chu had to make up for his mistake. If he let these small fries escape, then Su Chu would not be Su Chu. Hey, where are you going? Su Chu led a group of people and charged forward like a ferocious beast. In an instant, he rushed to the shore of the dock, turned around, and with a big saber in front of his chest, he glared angrily and shouted, "Anyone who dares to take a step forward will be killed without mercy. Kill!" Cooperating with Su Chu, the divine martial guards lined up on the shore in a murderous manner. When the pirates saw this, their faces turned pale. They knew that there was no way out. In fact, they were already scared out of their wits by the divine martial guard. Seeing this, they no longer had the will to fight. They looked at each other and knelt down one by one to surrender. "Sir, spare us! Sir, spare us!" Speaking of which, pirates were the most unscrupulous. As long as it could save their lives, they would do anything. Humph! Although Su Chu despised them, he was not willing to wield his butcher's knife against a group of people who had surrendered. He ordered the divine martial guards to detain the remaining 5,000 pirates and deal with them when the battle was over. The merchants who were still at the dock saw that the ferocious pirates were killed in an instant and the pirate leader fled in a panic. One by one, they came out of their hiding places and thanked the divine martial guards profusely. However, Su Chu could not stand it. He waved his hand and said, "Don't thank me. Hurry up and see if those burning ships can still be saved. Save as many as you can." "Yes, General." The merchants were also distressed. After thanking the divine martial guards, they immediately called the sailors to go and rescue the ship. Friendship City was the capital of commerce and was also an important node on the Grand Line. There were hundreds of merchant ships coming and going from the brave port every day. This time, the merchants had suffered heavy losses because of the pirate. Apart from admitting defeat, they could not find anyone to compensate them. They could only blame it on their bad luck. Su Chu took care of the pirates outside the city. The Stone Leopard tribe also successfully sealed the North Gate. As a result, the 4 gates of Friendship City were sealed. The pirates who were still fighting inside the city had no way out. Sir Leopard ordered, "Send the signal." "Yes, sir." With a whoosh, a red signal flare flew into the sky. Sure who was inside the city, saw this and became spirited. He waved the flag and said, "Press forward! Kill!" The 1st and 2nd divisions of the Monolith Army were like ferocious beasts released from their cages, brazenly killing their way to the front lines. For a moment, the pirates who were still entangled with the Guard Division were caught unprepared. Under the charge of the mountain barbarians' heavy infantry, the pirates were forced to retreat. What's going on? Where did these reinforcements come from? The second leader of the Heavenly Wolf mercenary group, who was in charge of the front lines, frowned and began to feel uneasy. He ordered, "Quick, inform the big leader. There's a change at the front lines." Yes. In less than 20 minutes, the pirate responsible for sending the order had already returned. The second leader was furious. "Why are they back so quickly?" The pirate who sent the order stammered, "Be second leader, bad news. The city gate is blocked." "What?" The second leader's heart sank. Chapter 884. The 60,000 pirates who attacked Friendship City did not even last past the afternoon before they all surrendered. Nearly 30,000 pirates were buried in the city. After the war, the entire outer city was in a mess, corpses were everywhere, and the strong smell of blood permeated the streets and alleys. Even if there was a sea breeze, it would not dissipate for a long time. Gu Xiuwen, the governor of the Friendship City, took responsibility to clean up the city, appease the people in the city, extinguish the fire, and count the casualties and financial losses. Everything was in order. The restless people gradually calmed down. In the governor's mansion, Ouyang Shua, who had won the battle, was not happy and had a straight face. First, it was just a group of pirates defeated in the battle, there was really nothing to show off. Second, Farah escaped again, which made Ouyang Shua quite depressed. Third, there was a lot of suspicion behind this matter, as if there was an invisible hand secretly manipulating everything. The attack on the Friendship City was not an accident. Although the pirates were repelled this time, it was a huge impact on the reputation of the Friendship City as a commercial capital, and even on the reputation of the Grand Line. As the news spread, this negative impact would gradually spread, and it would be difficult to eliminate in a short time. Just imagine, in the face of a city that could be attacked by pirates at any time, would the ocean merchants dare to stop here for supplies? In the face of an unstable sea route, how many merchants would be deterred? The answer was obvious. Behind this attack, the target was the trade foundation of the Great Xia dynasty, and the intention was sinister. In the afternoon, the commander of the Black Snake Guards, Black Snake, hurriedly teleported from Rabat City to the Friendship City. Ouyang Shua's instructions to Black Snake were very simple: thoroughly investigate for me, find out who else participated in this pirate attack. Intuitively, Ouyang Shua suspected that there should be Farah in Somalia. Yes. Black Snake did not dare to neglect, and immediately mobilized a capable force, starting from interrogating the captured pirates, to find out the mastermind behind the scenes. The captured second leader naturally became the focus of the interrogation target of the Black Snake Guard. However, Ouyang Shua knew that Farah was the key figure and the soul of the pirate group. Therefore, Ouyang Shua ordered the former Mediterranean fleet, which had been renamed the Atlantic Fleet, to arrange the fourth and fifth groups to immediately cross the Mediterranean Sea and rush to the Gulf of Aden to arrest Pirate King Farah. Only by taking down Farah, completely wiping out the serious pirates, beheading him in public and bringing him to justice can the lost credibility of the Friendship City be restored and the prosperity of the Grand Line be ensured. This time, Ouyang Shua would absolutely not allow the tiger to return to the mountain. Just as Ouyang Shua was pondering about the situation in the Gulf of Aden in the study room of the city lord's residence, Su Chu came to report, "Your Majesty, the division commander of the Friendship City Guard Division is outside, requesting to see you." Ouyang Shua's brows jumped when he heard this, and he was instantly infuriated as he fiercely said, "He still has the face to see this prince? Pass on the order that there is no need to see him. Immediately detain him and hand him over to the Bureau of Military Justice of the Bureau of Military Affairs to deal with." In this battle, a dignified garrison regiment that had the geographical advantage and a strong city to defend against the attack of 60,000 pirates actually lost the outer city in less than 3 hours. It was truly a disgrace to the Great Xia dynasty. Pirates were cruel, but it was also an objective fact that the Garrison Guard Division had neglected their training and failed to command properly during the war. If it were any other garrison division, they would not be in such a sorry state. Under such circumstances, how could Ouyang Shuo not be furious? Yes, your majesty. Su Chu rarely saw the king this angry. He dared not say much and could only mourn for the division commander. It would have been better if he did not come to see his majesty, as the king might have given him a lighter sentence. Now that he was in trouble, no one could help. From the poor performance of the Friendship City Guard Division, Ouyang Shuo thought of other garrison guard divisions. It seems that there is a need for the Bureau of Military Affairs to conduct a major assessment on the various garrison guard divisions, Ouyang Shuo thought to himself. It was a taboo for a dynasty to rule a place with lax military equipment. That night, Ouyang Shuo personally hosted a banquet at the residence of the city lord to entertain the merchants in the Friendship City. To receive an invitation from Emperor Xia, it was a great fortune for the merchants. Naturally, Ouyang Shuo's action was to appease the hearts of the merchants. He tried his best to reduce the impact of the attack on the trade in the Friendship City and to restore the confidence of the merchants. Originally, this matter could have been handled by the mayor, Gu Xiuwen. However, the effect of Gu Xiuwen's appearance and Ouyang Shuo's appearance were different. In the huge banquet hall, Ouyang Shuo raised his glass and the entire place quietened down. Ouyang Shuo looked at the merchants and said, "The Friendship City was attacked by pirates and the imperial court will not tolerate it. The Atlantic fleet of the dynasty has set sail and will arrive at the Gulf of Aden in a few days. They will completely annihilate the serious pirate crew and return peace to the Gulf of Aden. Emperor Xia is wise." The merchants were overjoyed. They had been doing business in the Mediterranean Sea for many years, and they knew the prestige of the Atlantic fleet. They knew that with this fleet, the serious pirate crew would not be spared. Their restless hearts gradually calmed down. Ouyang Shuo continued, "The imperial court has a responsibility to defend its territory. Everyone trusts the imperial court, that's why you stopped at the Friendship City to resupply. The imperial court will compensate you 100% for the losses caused by the pirate attack. Tomorrow, you can go to the residence of the city lord to register your losses. After verification, compensation will be made immediately." The merchants looked at each other. They did not expect such a good thing to happen. According to the normal rules, even if the imperial court did not give any compensation, the merchants had nothing to say. This kind of full compensation was unheard of. "Thank you, Emperor Xia, for your grace." The merchants were so grateful, especially those who had suffered huge losses, they almost cried. Although the ocean trade was profitable, if all the goods were stolen, they would lose everything. The imperial court's action had saved the future of many merchants. Ouyang Shuo nodded. This move of his was similar to buying a bone with 1,000 gold. He would rather spend a little money to restore the merchants' confidence in the imperial court. This was more important than hundreds of thousands of gold coins. With this good news, the rest of the banquet was a joyous one. Ouyang Shuo bought people's hearts in the Friendship City, but he did not expect to receive bad news the next day. The Atlantic Fleet's 4th and 5th Formation were ordered to cross the Mediterranean Sea. They were met with a collective protest from the lords of the Mediterranean Sea, so much so that they did not hesitate to stop the ongoing negotiations. In their words, "Since the great Xia dynasty has promised that the Atlantic fleet will not set foot in the Mediterranean Sea, they should keep their promise from now on. The Atlantic fleet's action is undoubtedly a breach of the promise. We deeply doubt the sincerity of the great Xia dynasty," Caesar said. In desperation, the head of the negotiation team, Violet, could only urgently ask Ouyang Shuo how to handle this matter. When Ouyang Shuo received the news, he was speechless for a long time. This time, the great Xia dynasty was in the wrong. But isn't the timing a little too coincidental? Ouyang Shuo could not help but be suspicious. Was there a connection between the negotiation and the pirate attack on the Friendship City? Ouyang Shuo could not easily come to a conclusion. Last night, Ouyang Shuo had promised the merchants that he would send the Atlantic fleet to exterminate the pirates. If he broke his promise, it would be a slap in the face. All of Ouyang Shua's previous efforts would be in vain. Faced with this dilemma, Ouyang Shua finally set his sights on the southernmost part of the African continent. There was a magical place called the Cape of Good Hope. Before the Suez Canal was built, the sea route from Europe to Asia could only go from Western Europe to West Africa, and then around the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa to Asia. The Cape of Good Hope route became the only sea route for Europeans to go to the east. After the Suez Canal was opened, the role of this route decreased, but it was still an indispensable and important passage between Europe and Asia. Some large ships could not pass through the Suez Canal and had to make a detour here. Speaking of the Cape of Good Hope route, one had to mention the famous Crusades in European history. In 1000 AD, Europe began to change dramatically. The Roman Catholic believers hoped to drive the Muslims out of the Middle East. The Crusades launched by the Holy See began in 1096 and lasted for about 200 years. The appearance of the European army in the Middle East promoted the development of ocean trade. The Italian merchants in Venice and other places made a fortune by transporting and providing supplies to the warring parties. At the same time, when the Crusaders returned to Europe, they brought back spices, perfumes, silk, steel, and medicines from the Middle East, which became Europe's hot sellers. The ocean trade led to the rise of cities and towns, and also created a large number of wealthy European merchants. The power of European countries continued to grow. They set up armies and governments, and the taxes paid by the taxpayers were enough to maintain the operations of the armies and governments. By the 15th century, European countries were ready to move and were ready to explore. The Portuguese were the first to act. In 1400, they wanted to control the spice trade with the East. They wanted to bypass the middlemen in Venice and Arabia and directly do business with the East. If they could directly go to Asia to buy these goods by sea, they could greatly increase their profits. The Portuguese explorers had been to the west coast of Africa, hoping to find a route to India and East Asia. They finally arrived at the southernmost tip of the African continent, the Cape of Good Hope. Compared to the Suez Canal, the Cape of Good Hope was not an ideal route. Because the Cape of Good Hope was located at the convergence of the Indian Ocean's warm current and the Antarctic's cold current, the strong westerly jet stream set off stormy waves all year round. In addition to storms, killer waves often appeared here. The front of these waves was like a cliff, and the back was like a gentle hill. They appeared frequently in winter, and from time to time, they were coupled with the rotating waves caused by the polar wind. When these two kinds of waves overlapped, the sea conditions were even worse. Moreover, there was a very strong coastal current here. When the waves and currents met, the entire sea surface would roll like a boiling pot, and ships that sailed here would often suffer. Therefore, the Cape of Good Hope had become the most dangerous sailing area in the world. Ouyang Shua's plan to let the Atlantic fleet bypass the Cape of Good Hope and open up a route to Somalia was also a helpless choice. The destruction of the serious pirates was related to the credibility of the dynasty. As the king of the great Xia dynasty, Ouyang Shua's words carried enormous weight. Since he had made a promise to the merchants, he had to fulfill it. Otherwise, he would be breaking his promise to the people and the world. Chapter 885. Ouyang Shua chose to open up the Cape of Good Hope route at this time because of his confidence and interest. Firstly, the nautical characteristics that Mazu gave the dynasty meant that the storm at the Cape of Good Hope would have a much weaker impact on the ships of the great Xia dynasty. Moreover, it was summer now, so the threat of the waves was even smaller. Secondly, Ouyang Shua also wanted to open up a new sea route for the dynasty through the Atlantic fleet to ensure that when the Mediterranean Sea changed, the dynasty would have other options. It could be considered as finding a way out. Thirdly, the African continent nurtured great wealth, and it was really worth the risk. Historically, since the Spanish occupied Ceuta in 1415, the European powers began to colonize Africa. It reached its peak at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. About 95% of the African territory was divided by the powers, and resources were plundered for a long time. The great powers colonized Africa not because they had nothing to do, and naturally, there were benefits. Firstly, the vast land of the African continent could be reclaimed as countless cash crop planting areas, becoming an excellent raw material base. Secondly, the African continent was extremely rich in rare minerals, and it was an invisible treasure trove. The gold mines in South Africa, Zimbabwe, and other countries, the diamonds in the Congo, the magical Madagascar Islands, and so on were all worth exploring. Of course, Ouyang Shua did not agree with the European countries colonizing the African continent. He preferred to cooperate with the African countries through a more gentle method to achieve mutual benefit. As mentioned earlier, apart from a few Mediterranean countries like Egypt, most of Africa did not have the historical heritage of China, nor did they have the advanced technology of the West. However, they had a large population, and it was difficult for them to move forward in the game. Their only pleasure was to fight against each other among the large tribes. Precisely because of this, the Great Xia dynasty could export advanced agricultural technology to the African continent and use Africa's labor and natural resources to achieve mutual benefit. Of course, if it were to be implemented, it would be a very large systematic project, and it would not be done overnight. During this period, they would probably have to compete with the European and American lord. How could the European and American lords in the game care about the countless African continent? If the establishment of the Friendship City in Somalia was the first step for the dynasty to set foot on the African continent, and the occupation of Morocco was an important step to exert influence on the African continent, then opening up the Cape of Good Hope route was a key step for the dynasty to explore cooperation with the African continent. Thinking of this, Ouyang Shua immediately ordered the Atlantic Fleet Admiral Alvaro to personally lead the 4th and 5th fleets on the journey to open up the Cape of Good Hope route. This trip will be difficult and dangerous. Only an experienced marine like Alvaro can make Ouyang Shua feel at ease. Ouyang Shua really wanted to know how the feudal lords of the Mediterranean Sea would feel when they found out that the sea route at the Cape of Good Hope had been opened up by the Great Xia dynasty. By that time, the only bargaining chip in their hands would no longer be reliable. June 5, Friendship City. That day, Du Ruhue, the Minister of Military Affairs and Minister of Military Affairs, rushed from Rabat to Friendship City to report to the king the opinion of the Privy Council on the reorganization of the 290,000 surrendered soldiers in Morocco. 290,000 soldiers surrendered, including 120,000 surrendered soldiers from the territory and 170,000 Imperial Guard. After being appraised by the Bureau of Military Affairs, 10,000 disabled soldiers were no longer suitable to continue serving in the army. They were arranged to retire and return to their original homes. As a result, the actual number of soldiers that could be reorganized was 280,000, enough for 4 whole corps. The first to be formed were the 4 garrison divisions of the Morocco province, using up a total of 540,000 soldiers, mainly drawn from the territory's surrendered troops. Then there was the field army stationed in Morocco. The reorganization plan given by the Bureau of Military Affairs was different from the other corps, which made Ouyang Shua's eyes light up. In the study of the city lord's residence, Du Ruhue reported, "The Bureau of Military Affairs has suggested that we establish a separate Morocco corps outside of the current army system to be responsible for the defense of the Morocco province." The designation of the dynasty's army was fixed, and Ouyang Shua had long since come up with an overall plan. In addition to the existing 5 corps, the Imperial Guard, the City Guard, the Dragon Stallion Army, the Stalwart Tiger Army, and the Hidden Leopard Army, there would also be 3 corps designations: the Imperial Guard, the Flying Bear Army, and the Soaring Eagle Army. According to the standards set by Ouyang Shua, if the dynasty did not have a new divine general joining, then these 3 corps designations would not be used. As a result, the Bureau of Military Affairs wanted to establish a separate corps outside of the army system. Du Ruhui continued, the Maroka Corps consists of 4 infantry divisions, 1 cavalry division, 1 direct brigade, 1 direct musketeer brigade, 1 aerial squadron, 1 marine unit, and 1 naval formation. It is a combination of land, sea, and air forces, with a total of 100,000 soldiers. Du Ruhui had spent a lot of thought on this organization. If the Maroka province were to base a corps like the Yunnan province, then the army would be too large and would drag the Maroka province down. And if they were to station an ordinary field corps, then the military strength would be slightly thin. Considering the strategic position of the Maroka province, as well as the rapid development of the dynasty's military industry, Du Ruhui had broken the rules and come up with this mixed organization plan. Equipping a musketeer brigade was firstly to fight against the Western musketeers, and secondly, the dynasty's industrialization had already achieved some results, so they had the ability to produce enough muskets. As for the formation of aerial squadrons, they had also benefited from the dynasty's industrialization. The pseudo-aircraft manufacturing technology obtained from Atlantis City had already been thoroughly understood by the 7th Research Institute. A month ago, the pseudo-aircraft manufacturing base had already been planned to land in Steel City. Thus, the time for the various corps to equip themselves with aerial squadrons was gradually approaching. The Maroka Corps was very lucky, becoming the first field corps to be equipped with such a squadron. With such a mixed army, sea, and air force holding the fort, the Maroka province would be safe. Ouyang Shua nodded approvingly, then said, "This prince generally agrees with the Bureau of Military Affairs reorganization plan for the Maroka Corps. However, since the Maroka Corps is different from the regular Army Corps, for the sake of distinction, the Maroka Corps can be officially named the Maroka Corps. In the Army's order of battle, a corps will be a combat unit between a corps and a corps, mainly used for overseas garrisons." "Your Majesty is wise." Du Ruhui was truly impressed. Ouyang Shua waved his hand and said, "There's no need to be impatient for the Maroka Corps' Marine Corps and Navy formation. Currently, the Atlantic Fleet is holding the fort in the surrounding waters, so the Maroka Corps' Navy formation can be allocated according to Z1 warships to avoid wasting resources. The Bureau of Military Affairs will have to discuss this with the Navy Command." "Rest assured, Your Majesty." Du Ruhui's position in the Bureau of Military Affairs and the Grand Council was equivalent to building a bridge between the two organizations. It was helpful for cross-military communication and coordination, so Ouyang Shua didn't have to attend to everything personally. After the briefing, Ouyang Shua asked, "Does the Bureau of Military Affairs have anyone to recommend for the Corps Commander candidate?" Du Ruhui was startled, then bowed and said, "The Corps Commander candidate still needs Your Majesty's approval." Ouyang Shua thought for a moment, then said, "Then appoint Shi Dakai." As the #1 general of the Taiping Army, Shi Dakai wasn't just skilled in cold weapons, he was also familiar with firearms. Whether it was on land or on water, Shi Dakai had abundant combat experience. Assigning such a general to command the Maroka Corps was truly appropriate. The status of a corps was higher than that of a corps, and Shi Dakai had been promoted not long after taking the position of corps commander. It was clear how much Ouyang Shua liked this general. Coupled with the special nature of overseas armies, it was extremely easy for a general to become independent. Thus, a general that Ouyang Shua didn't fully trust could not assume this position. Shi Dakai's vacated position of 5th Dragon Stallion Army Commander will be given to Xiao Chaogui of the Stalwart Tiger Army 2nd Division. In addition, arrange for Fubo General Ma Yuan to assume the position of Maroka Corps Commander. "Yes." Du Ruhui solemnly nodded, sighing in admiration at His Majesty's ability to judge the right people. Other than the 4 garrison divisions and the Maroka Corps, there were 1, 26 million surrendered soldiers that needed to be reorganized. According to the Bureau of Military Affairs' previous reorganization plan, an Imperial Guard Corps would be formed, and the remaining soldiers would be assigned elsewhere. Of the Imperial Guard's 3 corps, the 1st Corps was stationed in the capital all year round, while the 2nd and 3rd Corps were cavalry corps. However, they lacked an infantry corps to rotate with the 1st Corps. But the incident at Friendship City had caused Ouyang Shua to change his mind. Ouyang Shua looked at Du Ruhui and said, "Follow the standards of the Morocco Corps and form the Somali Corps. Station them in Friendship City, and ensure that Friendship City is safe." Du Ruhui's heart trembled. He had a vague feeling that His Majesty wasn't just forming the Somali Corps to defend Friendship City. It was likely that His Majesty had other ideas after Somalia's repeated disobedience. But this kind of conjecture was not something he could say. Ouyang Shua continued, "Di Qing, the commander of the stalwart Tiger Army's 2nd Division, is to be the commander of the Somali Corps. Fan Lihua, the commander of the stalwart Tiger Army's 3rd Division, will replace Di Qing as the commander of the 2nd Division. Hong Ying, the commander of the 3rd Division of the 3rd Division, will follow Fan Lihua and be transferred to the 2nd Division's 1st Division. At present, the only ones qualified to be the commander of the 2nd Division were Shi Wansui, Di Qing, and Zhang Han." Du Ruhui was rather surprised that His Majesty had chosen Di Qing instead of the most trusted Shi Wansui. Little did he know that Ouyang Shua had other plans for this loyal general, Shi Wansui, in the future. With Di Qing's departure from the stalwart Tiger Army, Fan Lihua would be the stalwart Tiger Army's #1 general, second only to Sun Bin. It was only natural for her to take over as the commander of the 2nd Division. At the same time, Ouyang Shua also made use of this opportunity to raise Hong Ying's rank by half. Ouyang Shua continued to make adjustments to the commanders. Zhao Shi, the commander of the stalwart Tiger Army's 2nd Division's 1st Division, will be promoted to the commander of the 3rd Division. Speaking of which, it was time for Zhao Shi, the veteran, to show off his abilities. Du Ruhui nodded and noted down the series of adjustments made by His Majesty. The new round of military reorganization triggered by the Battle of Morocco, although there were no changes to the organization of the 3 armies, it truly affected the fate of the generals in the armies. Chapter 886. After the reorganization of the Somali Corps, there were still 26,000 surrendered soldiers left, which was only enough to form 2 divisions. To the great Xia dynasty, this was undoubtedly of little value. Fortunately, Ouyang Shua already had a plan. He said to Du Ruhui, "The remaining 26,000 surrendered soldiers will be quietly handed over to Atlantis as a token of gratitude." Kalia had helped a lot in this battle in Morocco. Coupled with the previous series of events, Ouyang Shua owed Kalia a huge favor. He had long said that he would give Atlantis a huge gift. The 26,000 surrendered soldiers were only a part of the gift. In addition, Ouyang Shua was also preparing to select 50,000 people from the citizens of Morocco to migrate to Atlantis. In the future, the Morocco province would also shoulder the heavy responsibility of transporting food, vegetables, meat, and other daily necessities to Atlantis, becoming the strong backing of Atlantis. The great Xia dynasty's aid to Atlantis would be comprehensive. This aid was nothing to the great Xia dynasty, but to Atlantis, which was located in the sea, it was extremely precious. It was what they urgently needed. Du Ruhui did not object. With such a loyal ruler, what else could he say as a subject? After finalizing the reorganization plan, a new round of reorganization of the dynasty's army officially began. At the same time, the aftermath of the Morocco province by the cabinet was also nearing completion. Ouyang Shua received the letter and simply took a detour from Friendship City to Rabat City. Before the Somali Corps arrived at Friendship City, the defense of Friendship City was temporarily guarded by Shi Hu. In Rabat City, the provincial governor's office had already been rebuilt. Mu Lanyue, the first female governor of the dynasty, and also the first governor, had officially taken office. With the help of the cabinet, the governor's office had also been completed and officially opened for business. The first troublesome thing was to deal with the promissory note that Ouyang Shuo had previously written. Therefore, the first thing that Mu Lanyue said when she saw Ouyang Shuo was, "Brother King, you've caused me trouble." Ouyang Shuo avoided answering and said to Ko Zhuan, who was standing at the side watching the show, "Elder Ko, introduce the progress of the cabinet in dealing with the aftermath of the Morocco province." Ko Zhuan cupped his hands and bowed before officially reporting. This time, the cabinet had transferred 200 officials of various levels from the imperial court and the 4 major provinces to establish the provincial governor's yamen, the 4 major prefectural governor's yamen, and the prefectural and county yamen. Apart from this, the cabinet also investigated the original officials of Morocco one by one. With the cooperation of the Black Snake Guard, they eliminated those who were clearly hostile to the dynasty, and the remaining officials were basically kept in office. The only thing was that they had to be evaluated by the administration of personnel before they could be reappointed. The above actions were all routine actions, and were no different from the methods used to take down other provinces. The uniqueness of the Morocco province lay in the clash of races and cultures. The cabinet's opinion was that, on the basis of respecting Arab culture as much as possible, the Chinese civilization should be gradually promoted to take root in the Moroccan province. The inclusive characteristics of the Chinese civilization should be brought into full play, and the original cultural essence of Morocco should be gradually absorbed and transformed, thereby radiating new vitality. The specific measures included taking advantage of the opportunity of promoting basic education in Morocco province, the parallel education of both Chinese and Arabic languages, and introducing 100 schools of thought into Morocco province. They would strive to complete the rotation of local officials in the Southwest University China Hall within a year, accept the influence of the dynasty's system and culture, and connect with the dynasty. At the same time, in some special towns with strong Arab culture, the governor's yamen allowed the local people to follow the example of the mountain barbarians and establish autonomous towns and autonomous villages, achieving limited regional autonomy. Especially in the eastern and southern mountains of Morocco province, the population was sparse, and the environment was harsh. Small settlements were scattered in the vast mountains, and regional autonomy would be the main form of local governance. There were also many detailed plans, which would not be repeated. The premise of the above measures was that the people in the country were stable, or else it would be difficult to implement. For this reason, the governor's yamen decided to implement the dynasty's basic welfare system throughout the province. Agricultural tax would be reduced for a year, and commercial tax would be halved within a year to show the majesty of the emperor's kindness. The families of the people and soldiers who died in the war would also receive compensation and pension. Other than the establishment of the yamen at various levels, another important task of the cabinet was to assist the Morocco province governor's yamen and take the lead in formulating the overall development plan of Morocco province. This plan involved the division of administrative territory, industrial support plans, infrastructure construction plans, large-scale projects such as ports, livelihood projects, and cultural integration. With the current talent reserves of the dynasty, they already had the ability to formulate such a detailed and scientific development plan. In the plan, the construction of Xiota City that Ouyang Shuo had previously instructed was naturally included. Other than that, the base city was also included in the jurisdiction of Morocco province. In the next 6 months, Morocco province would build 3 military ports in the 3 port cities of Tangier, Rabat, and Agadir to serve as the naval bases of the Atlantic Fleet. In view of the commitment to the Mediterranean Sea, the headquarters of the Atlantic Fleet would also be moved from the base city to Agadir. According to the plan, this included compensation and pension, as well as large-scale construction. The burden placed on the governor's yamen was not light. For this reason, the governor's yamen was prepared to apply for an administrative loan of 1 million gold coins from the Bank of the Four Seas. After listening to Ko Juan and Mulan Yu's report, Ouyang Shua was quite moved. After establishing the dynasty, a complete set of systems had gradually taken shape, and Ouyang Shua had indeed become more relaxed. This time, Ouyang Shua did not need to worry about the arrangements in Morocco province, and it had already been handled properly. Ouyang Shua smiled slightly. "Everyone, you have worked hard. We will carry it out as planned. We will solemnly obey the king's orders." Ko Juan bowed and secretly breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. Dealing with the aftermath of Morocco province was the first major task that the king had given Ko Juan since he had become the vice minister of the cabinet. In order to handle this matter well, Ko Juan rarely slept more than 5 hours recently. He was busy from morning to night, running through the 4 counties of Morocco province. Fortunately, his hard work had finally paid off. The king's approval of the plan was the greatest affirmation of Ko Juan. In the next few days, Ouyang Shua, accompanied by Governor Mulan Yu, began his routine inspection of Morocco province. He pacified the people, met with various officials, and boosted morale. When he had time, Ouyang Shua also went to the barracks to see the surrendered soldiers who were being reorganized. At this point, Ouyang Shua was no longer worried that if he did not personally participate in the reorganization of the army, there would be a situation where the soldiers only knew the general and did not know the ruler. This was because under the arrangements of the Bureau of Military Affairs, regardless of whether it was the active army or the reorganized army, there would be a period of loyalty and patriotism education in the army every month to spread Ouyang Shua's authority throughout the entire army. At the same time, under Ouyang Shua's instructions, the Bureau of Military Affairs cooperated with the Grand Council to formulate a series of measures on how to limit the power of the generals and prevent the overflow of military power. The future army of the dynasty would only become more standardized and professional. Just as Ouyang Shua was inspecting Morocco province, there was finally news of the King of Morocco, Mohammed VI, who had escaped during the chaos. However, this news was not good news for the great Xia dynasty. On the 10th of June, after going through many hardships, Mohammed VI and his entourage suddenly appeared in Algiers, the capital of neighboring Algeria, under the protection of the commander of the Imperial Guards, Ismail. In the afternoon, the Algerian royal family issued a public statement, saying that from this moment on, the members of the Moroccan royal family would be under the protection of Algeria. Any attempt to assassinate Mohammed VI would be a provocation to the Algerian royal family, and they would definitely retaliate. His attitude was rather unyielding. At the same time, Mohammed VI also announced that, with the support of the Algerian royal family, he would officially establish a kingdom in exile in Algiers in an attempt to restore his country. In the declaration, Mohammed VI also called on the people of Morocco to take action and fight against the rule of the great Xia dynasty. In line with Mohammed VI's declaration, the Algerian royal family immediately allocated a large piece of land to Mohammed VI in the core area of the capital to build the center of the kingdom in exile. On this land, the Moroccan royal family in exile would have absolute autonomy and autonomy. Its nature was similar to a concession or consulate in reality. When the news came out, it caused a huge uproar in the Mediterranean Sea and the African continent. Some of the suzerains in the African continent had already prepared gifts and were prepared to send envoys to Morocco to test the attitude of the great Xia dynasty towards the African continent. After receiving the news, some of the suzerains had already cancelled their trips at the last minute. Even some of the envoys that were already on their way were urgently recalled by the suzerains. Mohammed VI's declaration of establishing a kingdom caused the situation in Morocco, which was originally a foregone conclusion, to suddenly change. There were many variables out of nowhere. Therefore, the smart suzerains naturally chose to wait and see. The ongoing negotiations between the Great Xia dynasty and the suzerains of the Mediterranean Sea had also become troublesome because of this matter. Violet reported that the negotiation process had suddenly become difficult. Speaking of this, he had to introduce the country of Algeria. Algeria was a country in the Maghreb in the north of Africa. Its land area was the largest in Africa, the largest in the Mediterranean Sea, and the largest in the Arab Sea. It was ranked 10th in the world, with a total population of 3.5 million. Geographically, Algeria was bordered by the Mediterranean Sea in the north, Libya and Tunisia in the east, Niger, Mali, and Mauritania in the southeast and south, and Morocco in the west. In reality, the economic scale of the Algerian region was ranked 4th in Africa, behind South Africa, Nigeria, and Egypt. Oil and natural gas were the pillars of Algeria's national economy. Its natural gas reserves were ranked 5th in the world, and its oil reserves were ranked 14th in the world. Therefore, whether it was on the African continent or in the Mediterranean Sea, Algeria could be considered a pivotal country, playing an important role between the Mediterranean Sea and Africa. Because of this, the suzerains of the Mediterranean Sea and the African continent felt that the Great Xia dynasty would definitely not be able to do anything to Muhammad VI. Chapter 887. 12th of June, Rabat City, Morocco Province. The news that Muhammad VI had appeared in Algeria and established a kingdom in exile made Ouyang Shua hastily end his inspection of Morocco Province and return to Rabat City. At the governor's office, Milanyu, the governor of Morocco Province, who had returned with Ouyang Shua, held her first political meeting since taking office. The 4 county governors and the 4 directors of the governor's office were all present. Ouyang Shua sat at the side and listened, making all the officials present feel pressured. On the way back, Ouyang Shua and Milanyu had a detailed discussion on how to eliminate the influence of Muhammad VI, establishing a kingdom in exile and ensure the stability of Morocco Province. Milanyu had directly given the order for this meeting to be held. The offices at all levels must strengthen their patrols. Once they find someone spreading rumors, they must be arrested immediately. They must not be tolerated. At the same time, pay attention to the direction of public opinion and expose the absurd behavior of Muhammad VI during his reign. Let the people realize under whose rule they can live a good life. The resettlement work of the counties must be expedited. Before the immigrants arrive, we must make preparations to accept them. Do not be negligent. This work will be included in the governor's office's annual key assessment. If it is done well, I will report it to the imperial court for merit. If it is not done well, prepare to lose your job. When the officials heard this, they replied in unison, "We will obey the governor's orders." Ouyang Shua nodded to himself. Although Milanyu was young, she could still hold her ground in a big situation. This little girl already had a hint of the demeanor of a feudal official. With a little more training, she would become a good helper. Ouyang Shua had not misjudged her. After the meeting, Ouyang Shua summoned the black snake who had rushed over. When he saw the king, the black snake immediately apologized. The black snake guards did not do their job well. "Please punish us, your majesty." Ouyang Shua waved his hand and said, "This matter is not your fault." The overseas intelligence network established by the Black Snake Guards was still very weak. They did not have a foundation in the eastern mountains of Morocco and the Algerian region. It was normal that they could not find Muhammad VI. Another point was that Muhammad VI and his party had appeared in Algeria's capital, Algiers, so they must have passed through an official courier station. In that case, after Muhammad VI entered the country, the Algerian royal family was involved. Algeria was also an important member of the Mediterranean Sea. Ouyang Shua had reason to suspect that the Mediterranean Sea was behind this series of events, including the serious pirate group's attack on Friendship City. It could even be said that it had the shadow of the Silver Hand. Without the coordination of the Silver Hand, they would never have been able to come up with such a comprehensive plan. His purpose was simple. Firstly, he wanted to disrupt the Great Xia dynasty's global strategy and sow discord between the Great Xia dynasty, the Mediterranean Sea, and the African continent. Secondly, he wanted to increase his bargaining chips in the negotiations with the Great Xia dynasty. In such an important negotiation, whoever had more bargaining chips would have more confidence and chances of success. A further consideration would probably be the conflict of interest between the two sides in the African colonization. If the Great Xia dynasty were to gain a firm foothold on the African continent, the European and American members of the Silver Hand would be uneasy. The Silver Hand had never given up on restraining the Great Xia dynasty. Our opponents are very difficult to deal with. Ouyang Shua sighed. Hearing that, the Black Snake nodded with a solemn expression. It was only when they arrived overseas that the Black Snake felt the difficulty of carrying out intelligence work. There were traps and obstacles everywhere. Most of the time, problems could not be solved with money. Especially when they were out of Asia, the difference in race made it difficult for the Black Snake Guards to move around. The fact that the Black Snake Guard's overseas intelligence network could develop to its current scale was due to the Black Snake's brilliant methods and good leadership. It was precisely because he realized that the Silver Hand might be hiding behind the scenes that Ouyang Shua was very cautious about Algeria. If he were to go to war with Algeria at this time, he would undoubtedly fall into the Silver Hand's trap. In that case, not only would the negotiations with the Mediterranean Sea be forced to stop, but the African continent's suspicion of the Great Xia dynasty would also reach its peak. It would be impossible to talk about cooperation, and it would be exactly what the other party wanted. To say the least, Algeria was not a pushover like Morocco. Once the war started, if the Mediterranean Sea countries and North African countries were to participate, the Great Xia dynasty would definitely be dragged into the quagmire of war. Otherwise, how would the Algerian royal family have the confidence to make such a declaration? A murderous look flashed in Black Snake's eyes as he said, "Your Majesty, I have arranged for someone to kill Muhammad VI." Ouyang Shua waved his hand and said, "Muhammad VI naturally has to die, but this matter cannot be rushed. We need to have sufficient patience. The other party is being so high-profile. Perhaps they have already set up a trap and are waiting for us to take the bait." Black Snake fell silent. Ouyang Shua said, "When Muhammad VI left, didn't he bring a team of imperial guards with him? Let's start with the family members they left behind in Rabat City and patiently set up a trap to catch a big fish. For now, Morocco province is not in chaos, so we still have time. In addition, the Black Snake Guards have to cooperate with the Governor-General's office in the near future to clean up Morocco province. With Muhammad VI's words, this king thinks that those rats hiding in the shadows are probably very happy, right? This king can use this opportunity to clean them up. Your humble servant understands." Black Snake nodded with a murderous look. Morocco province was about to have another bloody storm. Ouyang Shua rubbed his forehead and leaned back in his chair. He waved his hand and said, "Go make the arrangements. Tell the men below not to be discouraged. This king still has great trust in the Black Snake Guard." "Thank you for your trust, Your Majesty." Black Snake cupped his fists as a hint of excitement flashed in his eyes. The appearance of Muhammad VI in Algeria had put the secret agents of the Black Snake Guards in charge of tracking Muhammad VI under great pressure. With the king's words, they could die without regrets. In the large study, Ouyang Shua leaned back in his chair alone. He closed his eyes and pondered. He looked a little tired. Recently, things had happened one after another, making Ouyang Shua feel a little tired. After a long time, Ouyang Shua opened his eyes and muttered to himself, "It's really getting more and more interesting." Although he was tired, he had to continue fighting when it was time to fight. Ouyang Shua reinvigorated himself and wrote a letter to Violet. the negotiations in the Mediterranean Sea had to continue. If the negotiation team gave up halfway or acted on impulse and did not want to talk anymore, then it would truly fulfill the wishes of the Silver Hand. In the letter, Ouyang Shuo urged Violet to do a good job of appeasing the members of the negotiation team. He told them to calm down and withstand the pressure. At the same time, he asked Korea to mediate and find a way to continue the negotiations. Among the Mediterranean Sea lords, there were still a large number of lords who did not want to shed all pretense of cordiality. As long as they used their brains and diplomatic wisdom, Ouyang Shuo believed that the current difficulties could be overcome. The key was not to be thrown into confusion. In dealing with such thorny problems, China's wisdom could often break the ice. At the end of the letter, Ouyang Shuo wrote, "If the negotiations are successful, all of you will be greatly rewarded when you return to Shanghai City. I won't be stingy with the title of nobility." At the moment, the greatest reward of the dynasty, and also the highest honor, was the title of nobility. With such a generous reward, there was no need to worry that the members of the negotiation team would not do their best. The next morning, Ouyang Shuo packed his luggage and prepared to return to Shanghai City. With Mulan Lanyue and Shi Dakai, two big shots in the Morocco province, Ouyang Shuo was very relieved. If Ouyang Shuo continued to stay in Labate City, it would instead arouse suspicions among his allies. If Ouyang Shuo left just like that, those who coveted him would not dare to act rashly. Before leaving, Ouyang Shuo gave Mulan 4 words: suppress with calmness. At this point, Ouyang Shuo's calligraphy had a solid foundation, and it had the sharpness of a king. It could barely be classified as calligraphy. Ouyang Shuo gave Mulan Lanyue these 4 words not only to remind her to handle the matter of Muhammad VI's kingdom in exile, but also to teach her the way of an official. As a high-ranking official, she had to handle matters calmly and without any ripples in her heart. Mulan Lanyue took the calligraphy and said with a smile, "I want to mount this calligraphy and hang it in my study." Ouyang Shuo pointed at his heart and said with a smile, "It's useless to just hang it. You have to remember it." "I will remember brother's teachings." Mulan Lanyue bowed. She would naturally remember her brother's advice and care. Ouyang Shuo nodded and turned to enter the teleportation array. At 10 in the morning, Ouyang Shuo returned to the summer palace. The matter of Muhammad VI's kingdom in exile only caused waves in the Mediterranean Sea and Africa. The China region did not have much of a response and remained calm. As soon as he sat down in the imperial study, Ouyang Shuo said to Qingyi, "Tell Pei Yun and Meng Jida to come see me." "Yes." After a while, the 2 officials rushed to the imperial study. "Your humble servant greets your majesty." "Have a seat." Ouyang Shuo called the 2 of them over mainly to supervise the immigration. With him mentioning it, things could be done faster and lessen Mulan Lanyue's burden. He said, "Official Pei, how is the progress of the immigration in Morocco?" Pei Yun's heart tightened. Although the king's tone was calm, the tactful Pei Yun immediately realized that the king was dissatisfied with the progress of the immigration work. She replied carefully, "The Civil Affairs Department has already compiled a booklet introducing the Morocco province and the immigration policy. It has been distributed in all the major cities. In view of the dynasty's prestige, there are countless applicants. Currently, the Civil Affairs Department is speeding up the examination of the immigration qualifications." Ouyang Shuo did not deny it and said, "The immigration matter needs to be resolute and decisive. This time, the examination conditions for the immigration can be loosened. The Civil Affairs Department also needs to increase the number of examiners. If there are not enough people, we can temporarily transfer people from the Yamen of Zhili Province or the local Yamen. We must complete the immigration work within half a month." "Yes, Your Majesty." Pei Yun bowed while secretly wiping the cold sweat on her forehead. Although the wrath of the emperor is not shown on his face, it is still as powerful as a thunderbolt. We do not dare to be careless. Chapter 888. In the imperial study, Pei Yun left first, leaving Meng Jida behind. Ouyang Shua first mentioned the matter of a 1 million gold coins administrative loan to Moroka province, saying, "This matter has to be handled in a special way, so the procedures can be simpler. Send the money over as soon as possible, they urgently need it." Meng Jida nodded, saying, "Please rest assured, Your Majesty. This humble subject will personally oversee this matter and liaise with Moroka province's governor's office, striving to approve the funds within a week." Ouyang Shua smiled in satisfaction. He liked Meng Jida's swift and decisive actions. Although Pei Yun and the other historical officials were useful, they still carried traces of ancient officialdom and were not efficient enough. They were unlike players like Meng Jida, who believed in efficiency in the workplace. Ouyang Shua had summoned Meng Jida not for this matter, but because he had an idea to touch base with Meng Jida, the manager of the bank, to see if it was feasible. This idea had vaguely appeared during the attack on Moroka, and when the Friendship City incident broke out, it became even clearer. Ouyang Shua said, "Do you know of the compensation that Rabat City and Friendship City give to merchants? This humble subject knows a thing or two. What do you think of this matter?" Meng Jida was startled. This was not within the scope of his authority, but since the king had asked, he had to say something. After thinking for a moment, he simply said, "Short-term losses, long-term gains." Meng Jida analyzed this matter from the perspective of investment, and sure enough, his words never deviated from his old profession. Ouyang Shua revealed the mystery, saying, "This prince is thinking that if the imperial court compensates merchants every time their interests are damaged, in the long run, I'm afraid that those merchants will become dependent and act unscrupulously." The human heart was the most complicated, especially to merchants. In reality, cheating the government of subsidies often happened, not to mention in the game. This was the difficulty of governing a country. Some policies issued by the imperial court might have good intentions, but if they were implemented in the long run, they might change in the end. Thus, when the imperial court made policies, they had to consider all aspects. It was not something that could be decided on a whim, and Ouyang Shua did not want this kind of compensation to become the norm. Ouyang Shua was thinking if he could come up with a more creative way to solve this problem. Meng Jida added, "Your Majesty's worries are not without reason." Meng Jida was no longer surprised by the king's viciousness and was instead used to it. Ouyang Shua said, "Since that's the case, is it possible for the Bank of the Four Seas to use this opportunity to start insurance? We can start from the most scarce marine insurance." The concept of insurance was not unique to modern society. In 2500 BC, the ancient Babylonian kingdom ordered monks, judges, and village chiefs to collect taxes as funds for fire relief. In the Roman Empire, the Empire, the Empire, the Empire, the Empire, the Empire. Roman Empire, the Empire, the Roman Empire, the Empire, the Empire, the Empire. All of these were the initial forms of insurance, which gradually became the insurance system. With the development of trade, in 1792 BC, during the time of Hammurabi, the sixth king of ancient Babylon, commerce flourished. In order to aid commerce and protect the caravan's horses and mules and goods, Hammurabi's code of law provided for joint sharing of compensation for losses. This situation was very close to the compensation mechanism of the Great Xia dynasty's ocean-going caravans. In 916 BC, in the Mediterranean Sea on the island of Rhodes, the king enacted the Rhodian maritime law in order to ensure the normal operation of maritime trade. It stipulated that if a cargo owner suffered a loss, the owner of the ship and all the cargo owners of the ship would share the loss. This was the origin of maritime insurance. The Great Xia dynasty had the advantage of monopolizing the world trade and shipping route. Ocean trade was flourishing, and the Bank of the Four Seas had a lot of capital. This provided the dynasty with the conditions to develop marine insurance. When Meng Jida heard this, His eyes lit up and he said excitedly, "Your Majesty's suggestion is very feasible." Following the establishment of the dynasty, the Bank of the Four Seas savings continued to grow. On the contrary, with the expansion of the country's territories, the number of customers dwindled. The Bank of the Four Seas is facing the awkward situation of not being able to spend their savings. Starting the insurance business at this time would solve the Bank of the Four Seas predicament and provide a new source of profit. Feasible, it really is feasible. Actually, Meng Jida had left out something. Once the insurance business was successfully developed, it would mean that the Great Xia dynasty's modernization would go up another level. Furthermore, it would be a great boost to ocean trade. With the insurance guarantee, it would definitely stimulate the passion and motivation of the merchants to develop ocean trade. On this point, Europe, which was the origin of the insurance industry, did not have such a unique advantage. European countries had few players, so the banks they opened were unable to absorb as much capital as the Bank of the Four Seas. Even in ocean trade, they had long fallen behind the Great Xia dynasty. Looking at the entire world, other than the Panama Canal in the American continent, the Great Xia dynasty had already completed the layout of the key global shipping route. The European and American countries could only follow behind the Great Xia dynasty and eat the leftovers. Ouyang Shuan never expected Meng Jida to be so excited. He said with a smile, "This king only has a suggestion. As for the actual feasibility evaluation and implementation plan, it will still depend on you professionals." Meng Jida bowed and said excitedly, "Your Majesty, please rest assured. The Bank of the Four Seas will definitely evaluate the feasibility of developing the insurance industry in the shortest time possible and come up with a feasible implementation plan." Ouyang Shu nodded and said, "That's good. This king will wait for your good news." Who would have thought that in this room, after the entertainment industry, another industry, under Ouyang Shua's bold expansion, would burst forth with unprecedented brilliance in the game, rising like a pearl. After Meng Jida left, Ouyang Shu asked Cyan Shirt, "How's the progress of the agreement with Hardstone City?" When Ouyang Shua went to Friendship City to deal with the sudden incident, the relevant negotiations had already begun. It had been 10 days since then. Before leaving, Ouyang Shua had instructed Cyan Shirt to follow up on this matter from the secret texts pavilion. Cyan Shirt raised his head and picked up a document from the table. He handed it over and said, "It has been basically finalized 2 days ago. Lord Taowu's side has no objections. We're just waiting for your return to make the final decision." Ouyang Shua took the document and said with a smile, "That's quite efficient." Cyan Shirt explained, "Lord Taowu's side is a little anxious, so the negotiations went much smoother than expected." Ouyang Shua instantly understood, and as he flipped through the documents he casually asked, "We didn't take advantage of others while they were down, did we?" He didn't want to arouse suspicion in Lao Ai's heart because he was greedy for a small advantage. Cyan Shirt said with a smile, "You told them before you left. How would they dare?" "That's good." After flipping through the document, the terms were basically the same as what Ouyang Shua had envisioned. Hardstone City had to follow the Great Xia dynasty as its suzerain. First, become a vassal. Taowu would accept the appointment of the Great Xia dynasty as the governor of Fengtian County. He would enjoy a high degree of autonomy within his jurisdiction under the framework of the Great Xia dynasty code. Second, hand over diplomatic rights. Hardstone City had to maintain the same diplomatic relations with the Great Xia dynasty at all times. Major diplomatic matters had to be reported to the Great Xia dynasty in advance. If necessary, the Chamberlain of Dependencies could participate. Third, hand over tribute. Hardstone City had to hand over 300,000 gold coins as tributes every year, which could be compensated with coal of considerable value. Correspondingly, the Great Xia dynasty had to fulfill the following obligations. First, confer nobility. The great Xia dynasty had to confer the title of third-class marquis to Tao Wu and make Fengtian County his fief. Second, military protection. In addition to helping Hardstone City build a coastal fleet, the great Xia dynasty also had to station a field army in Hardstone City. Of course, the daily military expenses of the army would be borne by Hardstone City. Third, waive customs duties. When goods from Hardstone City entered the country, the great Xia dynasty would waive all customs duties. Of course, goods from the great Xia dynasty would also be exempted from customs duties. Fourth, other assistance. The great Xia dynasty had to nurture 100 civil officials, 50 military officers, 100 medical officers, 50 shipbuilders, and 100 blacksmiths for Hardstone City every year. In addition, the great Xia dynasty would also invest in the construction of steel mills, munitions factories, and artillery manufacturing projects to promote the industrialization of Hardstone City. These were just the major terms. The agreement also included details on politics, military, economy, culture, technology, and other aspects. It covered all aspects of the territory's construction. All in all, it was a win-win situation. Hardstone City would sacrifice some honor and autonomy in exchange for the full support and military protection of the great Xia dynasty. After reading the document, Ouyang Shuo had mixed feelings. At this moment, he thought of the lively scene when the Mountain and Sea Alliance was first established. It had only been a few years, but the allies had disappeared one by one. The only one left was the fallen Phoenix City. Times had changed. The Mountain and Sea Alliance, that needed allies to contend with the Yan-Huang Alliance, had now grown into a giant in the China region. It had become an existence that the Yan-Huang Alliance had to fear and look up to. Ouyang Shuo had long turned his attention to the world. His main competitor had changed from the arrogant Yan-Huang Alliance to the even more arrogant Silver Hand. Ouyang Shuo's thoughts had also become more and more unfathomable. From a warm-hearted young man, he had gradually transformed into a lonely king who sat on a cold throne and had no friends to talk to. Survival of the fittest. The wilderness was cruel and real. Your Majesty? Cyan Yi reminded and interrupted Ouyang Shuo's thoughts. Ouyang Shuo was startled and immediately came back to his senses. He put down the document in his hand and said calmly, "I have seen the document. Let's draft an official agreement according to it. We will hold a signing ceremony at the Summer Palace and invite all the media to participate. We will announce this news to the public." Since he had already done it, Ouyang Shuo did not intend to hide it. Okay. Cyan Yi nodded and agreed. This was not a difficult task. Mobile users, please browse and read for a better reading experience. Chapter 889. 6th month, 15th day, Shanghai City, Xia Palace, West Hall. At 10 a.m., all the famous media outlets in China gathered here to witness a glorious moment. The great Xia dynasty's Xia King and Stone City Lord Wufu were going to sign a suzerain agreement. No one expected that the Xia King, who had just returned to China, would drop such a huge bomb. 10 minutes later, Ouyang Shuo and Wufu appeared in the hall together. Under the witness of numerous people, they signed the agreement. After signing the agreement, Ouyang Shuo and Wufu did not leave right away. Instead, they agreed to answer a few questions from the media. The moment he said that, all the media reporters raised their hand. They really wanted to know what was going on. Ouyang Shuo smiled and chose the name of the quick daily news. May I ask the Xia King, is Stone City still a member of the Shanghai Alliance since the great Xia dynasty is their suzerain? Ouyang Shuo replied, the cooperation between Stone City and the great Xia dynasty is still within the framework of the alliance. This is a closer cooperation within the alliance. Following which, someone asked Wufu, Lord Wufu, for you to suddenly accept the great Xia dynasty as your suzerain, are you being threatened? Is there anything behind it? Wufu was really calm. The Great Xia dynasty is recognized as the top territory in the world, and the Xia king is my friend. This cooperation is based on the strategic choice of the territory. There is no inside story. Ouyang Shua smiled and continued, if there was an inside story, why would we need to invite all of you? Ha ha. Friendly laughter broke out in the hall. As for whether or not they believed him, no one knew. After the interlude, someone asked, Xia King, as the suzerain of Stone City, what do you think about the recent conflict between Handan City and Stone City? After this person said that, the entire hall fell silent as they all looked toward Ouyang Shua. The media was the most sensitive, and they could feel that this was the true reason behind Stone City's actions. Ouyang Shua was mentally prepared, so he crossed his arms in front of his chest and solemnly said, as the suzerain, the Great Xia dynasty has the duty to protect the strategic safety of Stone City. If Handan City provokes us or causes trouble for no reason, it will be seen as a challenge to the Great Xia dynasty. This was a declaration of war. The reporters were all so excited that they were trembling as they hurriedly recorded down Ouyang Shua's words. Gossip, big gossip. Some reporters had even thought of tomorrow's headline, The Great Xia Dynasty Declares War on Handan City. Ouyang Shua continued to answer a few more questions before the signing ceremony officially came to an end. The moment the news conference ended, the news of Stone City worshipping the Great Xia dynasty as their suzerain spread across the entire China region. The entire China region was once again in turmoil. As the top territory in the world, every action of the Great Xia dynasty would attract the attention of the masses, much less such explosive news. Some busybodies even asserted, China is going to change. At the same time, the 4th Legion of the Leopard Legion Corps, housed at the border of Zhejiang Prefecture, received the order and immediately rushed to Shanghai City to teleport to Stone City to fulfill the promise of the Great Xia dynasty. And as early as a few days ago, the teaching brigade led by Kai Mao had already boarded 10 warships and embarked on the journey to Binhai Bay, shouldering the heavy responsibility of establishing the Binhai fleet. Stone City had also started to recruit soldiers to prepare for the establishment of the Binhai Squadron. Hence, all of this was bad news for Handan City. Zhili Province, Handan City. After learning that the Great Xia dynasty had signed a suzerain agreement with Stone City, Di Chen felt really bad. To Di Chen, who wanted to take down the entire Zhili Province, this was undoubtedly bad news. The Yan-Huang alliance had tried to enjoy the suzerain treatment in Yunnan city-state, but they did not get what they wanted. Who knew that the Great Xia dynasty would snatch it first? It seems that our oppression of Stone City a while ago has backfired on us. Di Chen was a little regretful. He did not expect Wu Fu to be so useless, unable to handle a little bit of pressure. What a coward! Di Chen was furious. Di Chen's actions were not without reason. He wanted to take down Stone City, but was also worried that his actions would attract the attention of the Great Xia dynasty, which was why he chose to compromise. Di Chen wanted to use the method of boiling the frog in warm water to slowly eat away at Stone City. Who knew that this frog would not play by the rules and jump into the bowl of the Great Xia dynasty without any hesitation? The old fox took advantage of us. Di Chen was filled with regret. Juedai Fenghua was speechless. In truth, she had already reminded Di Chen that he should either not do anything to Stone City, or he should deal a fatal blow and not give the Great Xia dynasty a chance to interfere. Unfortunately, Di Chen did not listen. Now, Stone City had totally sided with the Great Xia dynasty, and the situation in the north was getting worse and worse for Handan City. Di Chen gritted his teeth and suddenly said, "Since we have reached such a stage, I need to tell grandfather that we need to speed up the progress of that matter. If not, the old fox will really ride on our heads and shit all over us." The hibernating Yan-Huang alliance had never given up on preparing for their big move. Seeing that Silverhand was not going to bother about the internal affairs of the China region, the old men of the 6 families of the Yan-Huang alliance could not sit still anymore. During this period of time, they would meet up every few days to plan a counterattack. Just as Di Chun had said, if the Yan-Huang alliance did not come up with a big plan, they would be slowly eaten up by the great Xia dynasty. This concerned the life and death of their families, and the consequences were not something that young people like Di Chun could handle. The old men of the 6 families knew that the great Xia dynasty was getting stronger by the day. Recently, they had been attacking overseas, and their foundations were getting stronger by the day. Their reputation in China was like the sun in the sky. Such an opponent was tough to deal with. The time left for the Yan-Huang alliance was getting less and less, and the chances for them to make mistakes were getting smaller and smaller. If they were like Di Chun and the younger generation, where Ouyang Shu easily solved each time, the Yan-Huang alliance would have no way to survive. The current Yan-Huang alliance could not take such a huge blow. As a result, the old men had great foresight, using their wisdom and vision to bring out the art of compromise to the extreme. They were preparing for a huge plan, a Plan Z. However, this plan was simply too huge, and the interests involved were too complicated. Along with the fact that it was a negotiation between 6 parties, each with different demands and animosity between them, it was not something that could be settled in a day or two. Originally, Di Chun was patient, but after this matter, he could not sit still anymore. Juedai Fenghua's eyes lit up. She obviously knew about this matter and asked curiously, "How do we deal with the Feng family? That is a huge problem." Di Chun was really confident, "Grandfather will have a way." Di Chun had enough information about his grandfather's ability. If he went all out, the entire China would be shaken. When Juedai Fenghua heard that, she was speechless. Afternoon, Shanghai City, Xia Palace. Using the chance of signing the agreement, Ouyang Shua had a detailed discussion with Wufu, and the results were pretty good. At least the two of them had the same goal and did not have many differences. Wufu was not Xuanlong Dianxue, and he would not go to extremes. He was a pragmatist, and from the start, he aimed for the interests of Planet Hope. As long as he could reach that goal, having absolute autonomy was not important. Yesterday, Ouyang Shua personally sent letters to Feng Chihuang and Gong Chengshi to explain the agreement with Stone City. He wanted to remove any misunderstandings and prevent any problems in their hearts. Out of the members of the Shanghai Alliance, Mulan Yu and Bai Hua had submitted to the Great Xia dynasty. Ouyang Shua had personally kicked Xuanlong Dianxue out of the game, and now Wufu had fallen. Gong Chengshi had visited Ouyang Shua, and the two of them had an ambiguous relationship. Regarding this, the outside world had spread rumors that Ouyang Shua was aggressive and that he had bad intentions when he formed the Shanghai Alliance. He wanted to swallow up his allies right from the start. Ouyang Shua could not defend himself, but luckily, he did not need to. The current Great Xia dynasty was not something that could be shaken by rumors. Those people who started the rumors were afraid of the Great Xia dynasty and did not even dare to speak in public. Towards such people, why would Ouyang Shua bother about them? However, even if Ouyang Shua did not bother about them, it did not mean that the others would not have problems. Especially Feng Chihuang, who was a strong woman. As the only seedling of the Shanghai Alliance, some rumors would unavoidably affect Feng Chihuang's judgment. Hence, Ouyang Shua needed to make things clear to Feng Chihuang to clarify their bottom lines. In truth, Ouyang Shua had never planned to totally merge fallen Phoenix City into the Great Xia dynasty system. Although Bai Hua and Feng Chihuang were both famous lords in the wilderness, they were very different internally. Bai Hua was strong, but it felt like she was being forced into a corner. As the big sister of the Consonant Studio and the leader of the Front Guild, many people had high hopes for Bai Hua. Hence, Bai Hua had no choice but to be strong. In her bones, Bai Hua did not value power that much. She would rather be under the leadership of a powerful figure, receive orders, and be able to carry out orders well. If she really faced everything alone, it would not be her style. As such, Bai Hua agreed to merge Consonant City into the Great Xia dynasty. Feng Qiuhuang was different. Like her name, Feng Qiuhuang was a prideful phoenix. She had an unyielding stubbornness in her bones, and she had a natural control over power. Speaking of which, Feng Qiuhuang was similar to Wu Zetian in history. Facing such a prideful phoenix, forcefully merging fallen Phoenix City into the Great Xia dynasty system would only restrict her and block her light. Ouyang Shua had been looking forward to her becoming the first queen of the wilderness. Chapter 890. P.S. This chapter is mainly about the background story of the Battle of Fei River. Those who don't like or don't understand this part of history can just skip it. On the 16th of June, all the major media outlets in China reported in detail the news that Hardstone City had accepted the Great Xia dynasty as its suzerain in a prominent position, pushing the players to a climax. At this moment, a system announcement suddenly spread throughout the China region. System announcement. The China region has successfully promoted 30 Level 2 cities, triggering the battle system. The 7th battle, a Battle of Fei River, will officially begin in 3 days. Please look forward to it. Friendly reminder: the Battle of Fei River is a non-mandatory battle scenario mission. Only territories that have been promoted to Level 2 are eligible to participate. Until now, there were less than 50 territories in the wilderness of the China region. The lowest level was already a Level 1 city, and Level 2 cities were the backbone. As for Di Chun and the others, they had long been promoted to Level 1 marquises and their territories to Level 3 cities. However, there was a huge gap between a marquis and a duke. Not to mention Di Chun, even Feng Qiuhuang only had 400,000 merit points, which was less than half of what a duke needed. It seemed like the birth of a second capital city in the China region was still far away. Ouyang Shua had mixed feelings about the Battle of Fei River. In his previous life, the development of the China region wasn't as fast as this one. Before Ouyang Shua was reincarnated, the Battle of Fei River was the last battle. This meant that Ouyang Shua would no longer be able to foresee the next battle. The Battle of Fei River took place in 383 AD. The former Qin sent troops to invade the Eastern Jin dynasty. In the end, the Eastern Jin dynasty defeated the former Qin army of 12 million with only 80,000 soldiers. The former Qin, which had an absolute advantage, lost to the Eastern Jin dynasty, and the country fell. The northern tribes all left the former Qin's rule and split into several regimes led by the later Qin and the later Yan. The Eastern Jin dynasty took this opportunity to invade the north and push the border to the Yellow River. For the next few decades, the Eastern Jin dynasty was not invaded by other tribes. To understand the Battle of Fei River, it had to be placed in the special historical background of the Wei, Jin, and Southern and Northern dynasties. The Wei, Jin, Southern, and Northern dynasties were also known as the Three Kingdoms, 2 Jin, 16 Kingdoms, and Southern and Northern dynasties. From Chao Pai's ascension to the Sui dynasty's conquest of Qin and unification of China, a total of 369 years had passed. This period was the period of the most frequent regime changes in China's history. Long-term separatist rule, continuous wars, and more than 30 dynasties of various sizes rose and fell in 300 years. The Wei, Jin, and Southern and Northern dynasties inherited the Han and Jin dynasties, and the Sui and Tang dynasties. During this period of time, each dynasty was short and chaotic. It was also during this special period that metaphysics, Taoism, Buddhism, and Persian and Greek cultures were introduced. Many new cultural factors influenced and permeated each other. This period was also a period of transformation and reform of the feudal dynasty system, and its position in history was no less than that of the pre-Qin dynasty. The system of the Sui and Tang dynasties was gradually developed and finalized during this period, and its influence lasted until the Northern Song dynasty. In the year 265, Sima Yan replaced Qiao Wei and established a new regime. The country was named Jin and its capital was set at Luoyang. The three kingdoms were ended and the world was once again unified. Unfortunately, this unified dynasty was only a flash in the pan. After the destruction of the kingdom of Wu, the aristocrats of the Western Jin dynasty became extravagant and corrupt. The political atmosphere was dark and the aristocratic families were in charge. During this period, a large number of nomadic tribes moved inland and were taken in as slaves by the aristocratic families. At that time, the foreign tribes in Guangzhou and Liangzhou accounted for half of the local population. Because of the large number of people that moved in, it was the foreshadowing of the fall of the Western Jin dynasty and the Five Barbarians' Rebellion. In the year 299, the Western Jin dynasty fought for the throne, which led to the Eight Lords' Rebellion. It lasted for 7 years, and the ethnic groups that moved inland took the opportunity to raise their troops, causing the tragedy of the Five Barbarians' Rebellion. A large number of people and aristocratic families moved south. The Five Barbarians' Rebellion started from the fall of the Western Jin dynasty until the unification of the north by Xianbei and Northern Wei. It was also known as the Yongjia Rebellion, the sinking of the Central Plains, and the fall of the Central Plains. This period was a disaster for the Han people. The north and south of the world were divided and confronted each other for a long time. The Five Barbarians mainly referred to the Xiongnu, Xianbei, Jie, Chang, and Di tribes. Before the Battle of Fei River, the Qin Emperor Fu Jian was from the Di tribe. In the year 357, the king of the Eastern Sea, Fu Jian, launched a coup. He deposed the former Qin Emperor Fu Sheng and ascended the throne. He was known as the Heavenly King of the Great Qin dynasty and changed the era to Yongxing. In the next 30 years, the great Emperor Fu Jian put Wang Meng and the others in important positions. He strengthened the country and conquered the former Yan, former Liang, and Dai. Finally, he unified the north and formed a confrontation with the Eastern Jin dynasty. Fu Jian was an excellent monarch, and none of the emperors in the Jin dynasty could compare with him. During the conquest of the former Yan, former Liang and Dai, Fu Jian never killed the captive emperors, generals, and ministers. Instead, he treated them well. This might be due to Fu Jian's generous character, but it was more likely due to political considerations. Because the Di tribe was a small tribe in the north, it was a big problem for them to control the other tribes. Faced with this situation, Fu Jian did not want to kill the leaders of the other tribes, which would cause unrest. He would rather use some tricks to control them and even give them considerable military power. This included Murong Chui, Yao Qi, and the others. Ironically, after the defeat of the former Qin in the Fei River battle, Murong Chui fled back to the old land of the former Yan and proclaimed himself as the king. The disciples of the Murong clan galloped on their horses and wore armors. Yao Qi rose again and finally killed Fu Jian. In the year 375, Wang Meng passed away. Before he died, he said to Fu Jian, "Although the Jin dynasty is remote from Wuyue, it is a direct descendant of the Shua dynasty. Being kind and friendly to one's neighbors is the treasure of the country. After I pass away, I do not wish to use the Jin dynasty as my goal. The Xianbei and the Chang tribes are my enemies. They will eventually cause trouble for others. It is better to eliminate them gradually for the sake of the country." Wang Meng's advice made sense. After conquering the former Yan, former Liang, and Dai, the former Qin obtained a huge amount of spoils of war. However, it was not easy to digest these spoils. It took time for the races to assimilate and integrate. The small Di tribe conquering the north of China was like a snake swallowing an elephant. Logically, the snake's priority should be to secrete stomach acid to digest the elephant. It was not a good idea to swallow a rhinoceros before it was fully digested. Wang Meng was worried about the snake's digestive ability. That was why he had warned Fu Jian earlier. However, Fu Jian's rise was a history of continuous success. This gave Fu Jian a strong sense of self-confidence. He did not believe that his luck would stop. Fu Jian happily thought, swallowing another rhinoceros is not a problem. Unifying the world was a huge temptation. Fu Jian could not resist this temptation. Therefore, 7 years after Wang Meng's death, Fu Jian felt that the time was ripe and decided to attack the Eastern Jin dynasty. In the year 377, the former Qin intensified their attack on the Eastern Jin dynasty. That year, the former Qin used 170,000 troops to attack the Eastern Jin dynasty. Xiangyang city defended for a year before falling. The Eastern Jin dynasty's governor of Yongzhou, Zhu Su, was captured. According to Fu Jian's usual practice of using captives, Zhu Su was recruited as a former Qin official. However, Zhu Su did not give up. Instead, he played the role of a high-level spy and played a major role in the Battle of the Fei River. In the year 383, the former Qin emperor, Fu Jian, decided to use all the power of the country to conquer the Eastern Jin dynasty. He ordered that every 10 men in the country would be selected to recruit an army. He also ordered that all the horses in the country, be it public or private, be used by the expeditionary army. Thus, 870,000 troops were gathered. Among them, 270,000 were cavalry. In addition, there were 250,000 vanguards led by General Fu Rong, totaling 12 million troops. At that time, the total population of the Eastern Jin dynasty was only 3 to 4 million. The number of soldiers fighting the war was only about 100,000. However, compared to the million troops temporarily transferred by the former Qin, the 100,000 troops of the Eastern Jin dynasty were several times more powerful. The main force of this army was the Northern Prefecture Army. They were mainly made up of refugees. Why were they refugees? After the fall of the Western Jin dynasty, the refugees from the north moved to the south. Some of them moved to the south of the Yangtze River. They became the vassals of the landlords and became ordinary people. However, there were still many refugees who stayed north of the Yangtze River. They were different from those who went to farm for the big families. They had their own organizations and armed forces. In ancient times, it was not an easy thing to escape. There were dangers everywhere. When people escaped, they always wore their best clothes and hid their most valuable things in their bag. This made them the best targets for robbery. In troubled times, bandits ran amok. It was common to run into bandits and be stripped naked and thrown to the side of the road. The rebels were also around the corner. It was their duty to rob refugees when they saw them. Other than bandits and rebels, even the Jin officials had ideas about the refugees. For example, the Duke of Xiang of the Eastern Jin dynasty, Sima Qiu, had his men pretend to be bandits and openly rob the refugees in Hubei. There were more than 1 or 2 black-hearted princes who did this. It had almost become a promising industry. Even the famous Zhu Ti, the general of the northern expedition, had done this. When Zhu Ti first arrived in Jiangnan, he did not have many belongings. One day, he invited many high-ranking officials to his house and displayed many treasures. He said, "Don't be surprised. I just happened to go to Nantang yesterday and did something." Zhu Ti was not a bad person. Later, he led the army on the northern expedition and died in Hunan. The locals built an ancestral hall for him, and many people burned incense and worshipped him. The key was that the temptation was too great. There was a group of fat sheep lying outside. How could they let them go? Anyway, they had knives and guns. It would be a waste to rob them. Who wouldn't rob them? As for whether these sheep would have difficulties living after being robbed, who cared so much about that? Even refugees would rob each other. Unarmed refugees could easily become victims of their own kind. Under such circumstances, under the command of the leader, the refugees organized themselves. No matter who they were, if anyone dared to come and steal from them, they would fight them to the end. These leaders became refugee marshals. In this way, the refugees became a relatively independent armed force. Moreover, most of the refugees who went south had gone through turmoil and learned some skills. They were strong in numbers and could fight better than those who spent their whole lives farming at home. If they were not used to fight, it would be a great pity. In 377 AD, Xie Xian took in a large number of refugees from the north in Jinko and established the Northern Legion Army. Under the reorganization of a qualified general like Xie Xian, the Northern Legion Army trained hard for several years and soon became the most elite army in Eastern Jin Dynasty, and in the whole of China at that time. In the 6th year after Xie Xian established the Northern Legion, the Battle of Fei River began. In all fairness, Fu Jian conscripted 1 out of 10 men. This ratio was not too high at that time, and it was not rare to see a higher ratio. But Fu Jian conscripted the entire Qin Empire. From Hebei to Sichuan, from Shandong to Gansu, all had to be conscripted according to this ratio. This caused a huge problem. At that time, there were no railroads, trucks, or carriages for these soldiers. These soldiers had to rely on their 2 legs to travel. Under normal circumstances, if a person carried nothing and walked for 8 hours a day, and the roads were well built, he might be able to walk 40 kilometers. But as a soldier, he had to carry some personal belongings, and the road might not be so smooth. According to historical records, the army of Alexander the Great could walk about 25 kilometers a day. The army of the Roman Empire could usually walk 25 kilometers, and when they were especially fast, they could even walk more than 30 kilometers. But the army of the Qin Empire was not a professional soldier who had been trained for a long time. It was already very difficult for them to walk 20 kilometers. It was a chaotic time, and the roads were not well maintained. It would be even worse if they had to cross a river. Without a bridge, they could only wait for a ferry. Even ignoring these difficulties, it would take a soldier in the northwest 2 months to reach the Huai River Valley. The problem was that Fu Jian's preparation for the war was quite hasty. In the 7th month, Fu Jian issued the conscription order. Normally, this order would take some time to spread throughout the country, and then the local officials would have to spend a considerable amount of time to carry it out. It would take nearly a month for all the armies to be ready to go. But Fu Jian felt that time waited for no man. On the 2nd day of the 8th month, Fu Jian sent the Duke of Yangping, Commander-in-Chief Zhang Hao, and Murong Chui, with a total of 250,000 infantry and cavalry as the vanguard. He appointed Yao Qi, the governor of Yan Province, as the general of Dragon Xiang, to supervise the military in Yi Province and Liang Province. On the 8th day of the 8th month, Fu Jian set off from Chang'an for the battlefield, and the main army followed suit. In the 9th month, Fu Rong led 250,000 vanguard troops to the mouth of the Huai River Valley. Fu Jian's army reached Xiang City, and the army from Liang Province reached Xianyang. Pei Yuanlu, the governor of Zitong, led 70,000 naval troops from Bashu to the east. The army from Yu Province and Ji Province also reached Pengcheng. The war had officially begun. By this time, had all the armies arrived at the designated battlefield? It was obvious that they would not make it in time. According to historical records, when Fu Jian reached Xiang City, the army from Gansu Province had just reached Xianyang. The armies from all over the country were marching to the assembly point, and the war had already begun. What was more ironic was that before they reached the battlefield, the Battle of the Fei River had already ended. All they did was run around in the north of China, consuming large amounts of food and blocking all the road. It could be said that Fu Jian's failure in the Battle of Fei River was caused by the fact that he didn't listen to Wang Meng's dying words, ignored the opposition of Fu Rong and the other ministers, ignored the dissuasion of the famous monk Shi Daoan, Crown Prince Fu Hong, Duke Zhongshan Fu Shun, and even his favorite concubine Lady Zhang. The defeat of Qin at the Fei River was not a coincidence. Chapter 891. P.S. This chapter describes the process of the Battle of Fei River. Those who don't like it or understand it can skip it. Why was Fu Jian so anxious about the Battle of Fei River that he didn't wait for the army to gather in one place before setting off to launch a thunderous attack on East Jin and win the battle? It wasn't that Fu Jian didn't want to, but that he couldn't do it. What was the concept of gathering 1,000,000 soldiers in one place under the conditions of ancient technology? If they walked on a broad road, even if the road was wide enough for 20 people to walk side by side, the entire troop would have to drag for more than 50 kilometers. This was a terrifying situation that couldn't be controlled. Also, it was impossible to supply 1,000,000 soldiers when they marched together. The only way was to divide the army. Fu Jian's strategy was to divide the millions of soldiers into several echelons. If the first echelon collapsed, the second echelon would take over. They would be able to overwhelm the East Jin Kingdom's army with numbers. Fu Jian once said, "With my troops, we will throw our whips into the river to break its flow." In the end, the war ended before the second echelon had a chance to go up. Compared to the hidden dangers of the former Qin, East Jin before the Battle of Fei River was a different story. The news that Fu Jian was going to march south reached Jiankang, and the East Jin court was shocked. At that time, the main military power of East Jin was divided into two parts. One was the Huanchong army stationed in Jingzhou, and the other was the North Manchun army stationed in Huainan, led by Xie Shi and Xie Xian. Judging from the direction of Fu Jian's attack, the North Manchun army would be the main fighting force. Xie Xian was very anxious and asked the number one figure of East Jin, Xian, for orders. Xian was only a polite prime minister and didn't have any good ideas. He could only say vaguely, "The court has other arrangements." In fact, there was no arrangement at all. Xie Xian could only rely on himself. Huanchong of Jingzhou was also very anxious and sent 3,000 elite soldiers to protect Jiankang. In the end, Xian said to the soldiers, "The arrangements have been made. You should go back and strengthen the defense in the west." Huanchong heard this and sighed in private, "We are doomed." The court officials couldn't wait to be captured and went to Xian to make a decision. Xian couldn't face these people and simply left. He went on a sightseeing tour and didn't show up in Jiankang during the day. Some people boasted about Xian, saying that he had reclined on the eastern mountain for 40 years, defeated Fu Jian with a musical instrument, and defeated Fu Jian by playing the zither. In fact, this was completely the boastful words of a scholar. It was miles away from the truth. Deep down in his heart, Xian might have resigned himself to fate. Fortunately, even if he became a captive, his life would not be in danger. It was a tradition of Fu Jian to treat captives well. Before the expedition, he had already spread the news that after destroying the East Jin Kingdom, he would give Xie a position as an attendant. In Chang'an, Fu Jian even built a house for Xie in advance. Xie could only pretend to be profound and could not provide any help. Xie Shi and Xie Xian could only gather all the troops they could use and head out to fight Fu Jian's army. In the 10th month, Fu Rong's 250,000 men crossed the Huai River, captured the city of Shouyang, and besieged a Jin army at Kipshek. Fu Rong planned to annihilate the encircled eastern Jin army, so he sent an army of 50,000 soldiers to the Luo River in the east to stop the eastern Jin's reinforcements. At that time, Fu Jian's main force was still moving out. Fu Jian himself led a part of the army to Xiang City. The encircled Jin army wrote a letter to Xie Xian asking for help. Unexpectedly, the letter was intercepted by Fu Rong. Fu Rong happily thought that the end of the Jin army was near and immediately sent news of victory to Fu Jian. Fu Jian was delighted to hear this and immediately led 8,000 cavalrymen to Shouyang to meet with Fu Rong. The rest of the main force was still advancing slowly on the road. Xie Xian and the 70,000 soldiers of the North Mansion army entered the Luo River, intending to rescue the trapped Jin army. However, with the 50,000 Qin soldiers between them, the North Mansion army had no choice but to attack. One of Xie Xian's generals, Lu Laoji, led 5,000 elite soldiers to attack the Qin army at night. The Qin army was unprepared and collapsed. Just like all battlefield collapses, the soldiers could not determine the number of enemies and could not organize an effective resistance. They could only run for their lives. Panicked, the soldiers rushed to the Huai River. The former Qin generals could not stop the collapse and were either killed or captured. As a result, 15,000 Qin soldiers were killed and their weapons and rations fell into the hands of the Jin army. The 50,000 Qin soldiers were completely destroyed by the sudden attack of 5,000 enemies. This seemed to be a preview of a bigger collapse in the future. This failure shocked Fu Jian. This was the first time he had felt fear since he had set out on this expedition. After the victory at the Luo River, the main force of the Jin army continued to advance and met with the encircled Jin army. At this point, the 80,000 Jin soldiers on land and water were gathered and stationed at the east of the Fei River. At this moment, a person who decided the turning point of the battle at the Fei River appeared. He was Zhu Su, the provincial governor of Yongzhou of eastern Jin, who was captured by Fu Jian. After Zhu Su was captured, Fu Jian gave him preferential treatment according to tradition. Zhu Su was appointed by Fu Jian as an envoy to persuade the Qin army to surrender. Unfortunately, not only did Zhu Su not persuade the Qin army to surrender, but he also said to Xie Shi, although the Qin army has 1,000,000 soldiers, they are still marching. If they concentrate their forces, the Jin army will not be able to resist. Now the situation is different. We should attack quickly while the Qin army is not fully here. As long as we can defeat their vanguard and weaken their morale, we can defeat the 1,000,000 Qin army. Xie Shi originally wanted to defend and exhaust Fu Jian, but under Zhu Su's persuasion, he decided to attack. The Fei River was chosen as the battleground for the two armies. Fu Jian's army gathered at the west bank of the Fei River and faced the Jin army across the river. At that time, Fu Jian's army had a total of 250,000 soldiers. Fu Jian brought 8,000 cavalry from Xiang City. However, Fu Rong sent 30,000 soldiers to Jingzhou and lost some soldiers at the Luo River. He also left some soldiers to guard Shouchuan. Therefore, there were only 150,000 Qin soldiers at the Fei River. The elite of the Qin army were the Di people and were concentrated in the central army under Fu Rong's command. In addition, there were many Han, Xianbei, Chang, and Wuhuan people in the army. They were not loyal to the Qin founded by the Di people and came out of fear. The diversity of races increased the complexity of the formation and made it more difficult to command. Language alone was a problem. Each race spoke different languages and Fu Rong's orders had to be translated into different languages before they could be given. 150,000 people came from different races and were not formally trained. Now that they were crowded together at the west bank of the Fei River, even if an immortal was their commander, it would be difficult to command them. Both sides waited along the Fei River and did not make any moves for a while. At that time, Fu Jian and Fu Rong ascended the Shouyang city wall and saw that the Jin army was organized and their soldiers were elite. They also looked north at the plants on Bagong Mountain and saw that they were all shaped like humans. Fu Jian said to Fu Rong, "This is a strong enemy, how can there be few?" He looked worried and afraid. This was the origin of the idiom, "every tree is an enemy." It meant that after the defeat at the Luo River, Fu Jian had gone from underestimating the enemy to being afraid of the enemy and had lost confidence. At this time, Fu Jian received a letter from Xie Xian. The letter said, "Jun Xian's army has penetrated deep and is forcing the water back. This is a long-term plan, how can one want to fight?" If I withdraw from the army and order the officers and soldiers to deal with them, then your servant and Duke Yonglong can watch the battle unhurriedly. Won't that be wonderful? Xie Xian's plan was to fight as soon as possible. According to the plan, he would lead 8,000 elite soldiers to cross the river. If the situation went smoothly, the main force would cross the river and launch a large-scale attack. If they failed, they would have the main force to support them. There were many differences in the Qin army regarding Xie Xian's request. Most people thought that there was a problem here and they should refuse and retreat. But Fu Jian and Fu Rong thought, when the Jin army is halfway across the river, we can have the cavalry charge at them. How can we not win? Therefore, Fu Jian ordered the army to retreat. Fu Jian's idea seemed to be right. The Qin army was waiting for the Jin army to cross the river and had a great tactical advantage. But Fu Jian neglected one point. Did he have the ability to order his army to retreat in an orderly manner? Fu Jian only considered the enemy on the other side of the river and did not realize that the 150,000 soldiers around him could be a more dangerous enemy. The order to retreat was given and chaos broke out. Let's imagine how an ordinary Qin soldier would feel during this retreat. He was among the 150,000 soldiers. Looking around, there was a sea of people in all directions. He had always lived in the north and never dreamed that he would come to this place called the Fei River. He knew that a bloody battle was about to break out and he could die in this strange place. He was not sure how powerful the Jin army on the other side of the river was, but he heard that many of his men died in the Battle of Luo River not long ago. Thinking of this, he was very nervous, but the population density around him was so high that it would not relieve his pressure. Instead, it would make him more nervous. Fear can be transmitted between people and reinforce each other. He might not understand some of the officers' words. Even if he and his captain spoke the same language, it would be hard for him to understand them. The officer said, "We should retreat 500 meters to let the Jin army cross the river. Then we can come back and fight them, driving them into the river." This was too complicated for him. Besides, the officer might not have given him such a detailed explanation. All he knew was that the officer wanted him to retreat. But he did not know why they should retreat. Okay, everyone should turn back and walk. They knew that the Jin army was behind them and could charge at them at any time. This thought naturally made them feel dangerous. It was easy to imagine that some of them would speed up. The more they thought about the Jin army behind them, the faster they would walk. He still had a wife and a child. He did not dare to die. As soon as they walked fast, the people around them could not help walking fast. Seeing that the people around them walked faster and faster, they naturally became more and more afraid. This was a terrible positive feedback. If it was allowed to develop, the ending would be that everyone would run together. Logically, there should be an external force to interrupt this positive feedback. This external force was the commander of the army. But facing such a complicated organization and such a large number of people, it was difficult for the commander to deal with them. At that time, there were no decent communication measures. Except for military flags and bugle drums, they could only rely on shouting. It was difficult for junior officers and senior generals to contact each other. Plus the language barrier, it was even more difficult. The junior officers probably did not understand the development of the situation. Was the Jin army attacking? Had he already defeated his opponent? Should they retreat or retreat? He was likely to be involved in the torrent and was running with all his might. By the time the chaos had spread, even the military officers were powerless to stop it. The power of fear was boundless. They watched as 150,000 people changed from marching to walking and from walking to running. At this critical moment, Xie Xian's troops had already started to cross the river. Fu Rong saw that the situation was out of control and wanted to restore order. Unfortunately, Fu Rong ran too hastily and was hit by the chaotic army. As a result, his warhorse fell down and Fu Rong, who had lost his mount, was killed by the Jin army. After the Jin army crossed the river, they did not encounter any resistance. What appeared in front of them was the delightful scene of the Qin army running around and trampling on each other. Xie Xian did not hesitate and immediately gave the order to chase. The Qin army ran all the way to Qinggang in one breath. They were very determined to escape. No power could stop them. Those who fell were trampled to death, and those who were trampled to death were hidden in the wilderness. These defeated troops ran until night and still could not bear to rest. They ran forward day and night. When they heard the sound of the wind and cranes, they all thought that it was the pursuers of the Jin army. Fear had already penetrated into their bones. At this point, the 150,000 Qin army suddenly disintegrated. Fu Jian was also shot by a stray arrow. At that time, it was extremely chaotic. No one cared about the life and death of the emperor. Fu Jian rode alone to Huaibei. The Jin army obtained 10,000 pieces of brocade and 100,000 cows, sheep, donkeys and mules. Fu Jian's army collapsed without even fighting. The direct reason was that the army retreated for such a short distance. This ending would be inconceivable to a modern commander. But under the conditions at that time, it was the truth. When the sun rose in the east, there were still 150,000 Qin soldiers on the west bank of the Fei River. When the sun set, there were no more Qin soldiers on the west bank of the Fei River. Under the light of the setting sun, there were only trampled corpses that were beyond recognition. The fate of the Qin Empire sank with the setting sun. The soldiers who had not reached the Fei River immediately scattered when they heard the news of the Fei River's defeat. The 800,000 soldiers that Fu Jian had painstakingly sent out were not of any use, and were all disintegrated. Fu Jian's conscription caused the entire empire to be in an uproar, but he did not gain anything from it. Instead, many defeated soldiers joined the rebellion against him. The giant beast that was swallowed by the snake was not digested. Now, it tore open the snake's stomach and stood up in a pool of blood. The Xianbei rebel army established the later Yan Empire, and the Chang rebel army established the later Qin Empire. Fu Jian, who had never been suspicious of others, was betrayed by someone he trusted. He had to give up Guanzhong and flee to Gansu. Not long after, Fu Jian was strangled to death by Yao Chang, the leader of the later Qin. 20 years ago, Yao Qi was about to be executed. At that time, Fu Jian, who was still the king of Donghai, saved Yao Qi from the execution ground. It was like a trick of fate. At that time, only 2 years had passed since Fu Jian's ambitious conquest of the Eastern Jin Empire and his dream of uniting the world. Before Fu Jian died, did the farce on the west bank of the Fei River flash through his mind? At his most glorious moment, he suddenly lost the favor of fate. All of this was like a dream. Chapter 892. June 19, Shanghai City. In the 3 days of preparation, Ouyang Shuo was not only making all sorts of preparations for the Fei River battle, but he was also paying attention to the progress of the Mediterranean Sea negotiations. With Queen Kalia's mediation, and with Violet promising on behalf of the great Xia dynasty that the Atlantic fleet would not cross the Mediterranean Sea, the suspended negotiations were finally restarted. However, the feudal lord of the Mediterranean Sea became more and more demanding during the negotiations, which made Violet furious. Ouyang Shuo sent a letter to Violet, telling her to calm down and not to come to a conclusion immediately. It was best to drag it out and turn it into a marathon negotiation. Right now, Alvaro had already led the Atlantic Fleet's 4th and 5th battalions from the Atlantic Ocean and started sailing around the African continent, passing through the Cape of Good Hope and opening up a new route. The moment the Atlantic Fleet appeared in the Gulf of Aden, it would be the moment when the bargaining chips of both sides changed. Thus, Ouyang Shuo was not anxious at all. In these 3 days, another big event happened in Shanghai City. Just yesterday, the auction led by the Commerce Department for the qualifications to guard Rabat's satellite cities finally came to an end. The winner was a guild alliance formed by 5 large guilds in the capital of Xianyang. The 5 guilds merged into the River and Mountain Alliance, and with 4 million gold coins, 7% of River and Mountain Alliance's shares, and 50% of the taxes collected from the satellite cities, they obtained the qualifications to guard a guild and became another super guild in the China region. According to tradition, under the request of the River and Mountain Alliance, the Great Xia dynasty transferred 2% of the shares of the Bank of the Four Seas to the River and Mountain Alliance, at the price of 3 million gold coins. Compared to the first time they raised funds, the shares of the Bank of the Four Seas had increased by 50%. It seemed that the baleful blood mercenary group in Xianyang was too powerful, forcing the Xianyang guilds to choose to leave and find other ways to develop. Of course, to the River and Mountain Alliance, taking a step back might be the best option. In the second half of the 4th year of Gaia, the oligarchs in the wilderness began to rise, and the mergers and reorganizations between guilds intensified. As the gathering effect of the satellite cities increased, the guilds displayed more and more ruling power. To the other guilds, reorganizing the strong was a way to stand out. The prerequisite was to increase the quota of the satellite cities. In the current game environment, guilds that did not have the qualifications to defend satellite towns would have to rely on others no matter how large they were. The defending guilds would be wary of them, and it would be very difficult for them to truly rise up. There were only 2 ways to increase the number of satellite cities. The first was to promote the territory to a capital city, and the second was to destroy the country. As for the capital city, there seemed to be no hope for it. They could only hope for the destruction of the country. Because of this, many guilds had expressed goodwill towards the Great Xia dynasty recently. The guilds that failed in the bidding had already booked tickets to the next auction. Who in the China region didn't know that the Great Xia dynasty was the true powerhouse in the Kingdom War? However, Ouyang Shuo remained indifferent. He no longer had any interest in playing some sort of alliance game with these guilds. Simple, use real money to exchange for it. As early as a few months ago, Ouyang Shuo had been doing his homework about the battle at the Fei River. He had thoroughly studied the battle and knew the cause and effect of the battle. Ouyang Shuo wanted the inner scenery of the Golden Court scripture, which was the highest reward of the East Jin Kingdom. Therefore, Ouyang Shuo had no choice but to join the East Jin Kingdom's camp. If that wasn't the case, Ouyang Shuo would have chosen to join the former Qin camp and launch another counterattack. In Ouyang Shuo's view, if the mutant army joined, the former Qin camp would have a bright future. As long as the situation was stabilized and the situation didn't collapse, the East Jin Kingdom wouldn't be easy to fight against the former Qin army, who had the absolute advantage in terms of military strength. Fortunately, Feng Qiuhuang and the others were kind enough. After knowing that Ouyang Shuo had chosen to join the East Jin Kingdom's camp, they all chose to fight alongside him. Ouyang Shuo had already announced on the forum that he had chosen to join the East Jin Kingdom's camp. If the Yellow Emperor Alliance also chose to join the East Jin Kingdom's camp, then this battle would be too boring. Ouyang Shuo had already announced that no matter if Di Chun and the others were willing or not, they could only choose to join the former Qin camp. As for how the other lords would choose, Ouyang Shuo didn't really care. Some people on the forum said that as the battle between the Yan Huang Alliance and the Xia dynasty became more and more intense, the North Chuan City-State and the South Chuan City-State, which were in the middle of the whirlpool, would have internal conflicts and start a new round of battles. The Fei River battle was a test to test the strength of the lords. Ouyang Shuo scoffed at this. The players' way of thinking was too simple. It was undeniable that the Great Xia dynasty and the Yellow Emperor Alliance had hidden many chess pieces in the two city-states. However, no one would be stupid enough to expose these chess pieces in the battle. If anyone really judged the other party's chess pieces based on the battle's camp selection, they would be at a great disadvantage. The battle in the wilderness of the China region already felt like a battle between feudal lords. It was complicated and treacherous, and it wasn't something that normal players could understand. Unknowingly, a new batch of elites had been born in the game, and they stood out from the masses. At 9 o'clock in the morning, the system announcement rang on time. System announcement. In the year 383, the former Qin Emperor Fu Jian led 1,000,000 troops to conquer the East Jin Kingdom. In the end, he returned in defeat, and the dynasty was destroyed. The seventh epic battle, the Battle of the Fei River, has officially begun. Testing the conditions to participate in the battle, specifying the participating troops, choosing the camp. This time, the Great Xia dynasty sent out 100,000 troops. Ouyang Shua chose the 2nd Legion of the Imperial Guards, the first formation of the Cliff Mountain Fleet, the Marine Team directly under the Navy Command Division, plus the 3,000 Godly Guards and an aerial team. The Marine Team directly under the Navy Command Division had already finished their training in the Special Operations Training Base, and had officially entered the actual combat stage. This time, Ouyang Shua brought the Marine Team into the battle to give them a chance for actual combat. The aerial team had already become the standard for the Great Xia dynasty to participate in battles. Even if they couldn't effectively kill the enemy, they could at least be used as a scouting sword. After the setup was completed, Ouyang Shua heard the system notification. System notification. Teleportation has begun. After a short period of dizziness, Ouyang Shua and the others appeared in the Fei River battlefield. System notification. Welcome player not wearing anything to the East Jin Dynasty Camp. East Shore Military Camp. East Shore of the Fei River? Ouyang Shua froze. According to the history of the war, if the East Jin Dynasty Camp was at the Fei River, then Gaia had skipped all the prelude and directly pushed the Battle of the Fei River to the most crucial step. In other words, the two armies were facing each other across the Fei River, and the war could break out at any time. The Fei River was also known as the Fertilizer River, and it originated from the general ridge between Feishi and Shou County. It was divided into two branches. The branch that flowed northwest for 200 miles out of Shou County and into the Huai River, while the branch that flowed southeast flowed into Chao Lake. The battle took place at the southeast branch of the Fei River, and it wasn't very spacious. The torrential river water that flowed down from the general ridge gradually calmed down. Because of this, the East Jin Dynasty army could easily cross the river during the battle. Without much time to think, Ouyang Shua completed the registration as usual, and then met up with Feng Qiuhuang and the others. This time, the 2nd Imperial Guard Corps and the Divine Martial Guards appeared in the military camp, while the Cliff Mountain Fleet's 1st Formation, Marine Team, and the aerial team appeared at the Huai River, and were stationed with the East Jin Dynasty Navy. Ouyang Shua believed that Xiongba, Battlewolf, Dichen, and the others might have brought the navy to help, so that the Cliff Mountain Fleet wouldn't be able to control the Huai River. In the history of the Battle of the Fei River, the effect of water battles wasn't very obvious. Because of the appearance of the mutant army in the game, the situation would be different, and there would be many more variables. Not long after, the participating mutant army was teleported to the battle map. Just as Ouyang Shua met up with Feng Qiuhuang and the others, he heard a series of battle announcements. Battle announcement. A total of 30 lords participated in the Battle of the Fei River, with a total of 620,000 soldiers. The East Jin Dynasty has 13 lords, with a total of 370,000 soldiers. The former Qin Dynasty has 17 lords, with a total of 400,000 soldiers. For the Battle of the Fei River, all the qualified lords were present, and none of them were absent. Firstly, the lords of the second-level county cities were all second-rank marquises, and they could bring 20,000 soldiers into the battle map. They already had the capital to participate in the battle, and they didn't have to worry about being used as cannon fodder. Secondly, the competition in the wilderness was getting more intense, and the surviving lords didn't want to give up on any opportunity to gain merit points. Not only that, but the total military strength of both sides was basically equal. The former Qin dynasty had more lords, but it wasn't because the Yan-Huang alliance was more popular, but because they had 7 members. In comparison, the Shan-Hai alliance only had 4 members left. Of the 370,000 soldiers in the East Jin dynasty, the Shan-Hai alliance alone had 190,000 soldiers, more than half of them. Other than the siege lions, who brought pure infantry, Feng Qiuhuang and Suan Ni's troops were mainly cavalry. Similarly, the Yan-Huang alliance had 200,000 soldiers, which was exactly half of the former Qin dynasty's mutant army. This also meant that the future battle would be under the control of the two alliances. If the other lords wanted a share of the spoils, they would have to rely on the two alliances. Battle announcement. Because the East Jin dynasty's military strength is weaker than the former Qin dynasty's, according to the battle rules, the East Jin dynasty's army will automatically receive a 5% increase in defense. Because the difference in military strength between both sides wasn't much, the increase in defense was naturally much lower. A 5% increase in defense basically didn't affect the outcome of the battle. The only effect would probably be that the East Jin dynasty's mutant army would suffer slightly less casualties. Battle announcement. According to the results of the nobility and merit points test, the East Jin dynasty's mutant army will be represented by He Yu Wui Duke. The former Qin dynasty's mutant army will be represented by Di Chen, first-rank marquis. Currently, Di Chen still had the most merit points among the Yan-Huang alliance's members. He had even pulled away from Lord Chunshan, and seemed to be on par with Feng Qiuhuang. Handan City might really have a chance to become the second capital of China. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.